Therefore, no physical meeting location will be available. To access the meeting remotely, join from a PC, Mac, iPad, iPhone, or Android device using the URL that's on the agenda and on the PAB website. If you do not wish for your name to appear on the screen, use the drop-down menu and click on Rename to rename yourself to be anonymous. To request to speak, use the raise hand icon on the screen. And to join by phone, dial the number on the agenda and enter the meeting code on the agenda or on the PAB website. If you wish to comment during the public comment portion of the agenda, press *9 and wait to be recognized. Shall we do the roll call?
Yes. Board Member Calavita,
Here.
Chair Chang,
Here.
Board Member Harris,
Here.
Board Member Leftwich,
Here.
Board Member Levine,
Here.
Board Member Mizell. I do not see him. Board Member Moore,
Here.
Board Member Owens,
Here.
and Board Member Ramsey.
Here.
Okay, we have quorum.
Great. Okay. So let's see. Are there members of the public who would like to speak?
Chair Lieutenant Turner is here on behalf of the BPD.
Great. Thank you, Lieutenant Turner. She is now on the panelists.
Yes.
Great. Thank you for letting me know. We have Charles Clark, public member who would like to speak.
Don't we have to approve the agenda first? Or have we already done that?
I'm sorry.
No,
You are
we haven't
correct.
done that.
Skipped right over that. So Mr. Clark, please hold off for a minute. So let's approve the agenda. Any questions or comments about the agenda, which is relatively long this time around, 12 item. I'm seeing heads are not shaking, no. Okay. Now yeah.
Chair, I was wondering if
Yes.
there are items on the agenda, because it is long, that
Can be
are
postponed.
not quite as time sensitive and could be put towards the end.
Okay.
Director Lee, is it already organized like that?
I would say somewhat. One of the items I think is pretty much taken care of, which is 10E, because the council is already has before it an item to endorse Assembly Bill 2557.
Okay. So that's 10E.
Right.
So you want to, what would you like to do with that agenda item, just to be clear?
Well, I'm just saying that it's probably the least important at this point.
Okay, and it is towards the end.
Wouldn't we want them to know that we support them supporting it?
Sure. But we're talking about, I'm not saying you don't want to act on it. I'm just trying to respond to Board Member Calavita's request to know if these are in order of importance or urgency, I guess, timeliness.
We can combine the budget subcommittee report with item 9C.
Right. I actually thought that fair and impartial and budget could be, subcommittee reports can be postponed till we get to their items. Director search as well.
Okay. So 8A and B, and then 9C, push to the end. Is that correct?
No, that's not what I said. What I said was take 8F, which is a subcommittee report,
I'm sorry, yeah.
and combine it with 9C. So we would do
Okay.
it with 9C.
8F and 9C combined.
And also there's two references to the director's search. We can talk about it at the same time. So that's 8B and 9B.
8B and 9B.
Okay.
Okay.
And we could
There's also 10A.
That's right. Do you want to do 8B and 9B and 10A together when 10A comes up?
Or when 9B comes up.
Okay, so when 9B comes up, how about we just deal with 8B, 9B, and also 10A?
And 8A, the fair and impartial,
Yeah.
we can wait until we get to 10B.
Okay,
I don't need to make a separate report. Okay, with those changes, I move we accept the agenda.
anyone second that?
I do
Second.
second that.
Okay, was that board member Leftwich who seconded it? Okay. Any comments or questions about this? Okay, not seeing or hearing any, so moved. Changes are made to the agenda. So let's move on to the public comment. We have Charles Clark. And hang on, actually, I should have done this for, let me share my screen again so you have the timer. There.
And Chair, while you're doing that, I'd like to note that Ms. Beneva Thomas has joined us. She is now on staff as an investigator and will be introducing herself later.
Great. We look forward to meeting Ms. Thomas, which I understand she's been on the PRC previously. Mr. Clark, would you like to proceed?
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Mr. Chairman, Madam Director, and members of the board, I am Charles Clark, a resident of Council District 6. Let's talk about tear gas. I was appalled by your March 30th meeting, which airbrushed history to serve the narrow interest of those privileged enough to be included to talk about the police department's controlled equipment impact statements. It's true that the City Council prohibited the use of tear gas in Berkeley at its June 9th, 2020 meeting. But it's equally true that in July 2020, Council referred an exception to that policy to the Public Safety Committee and to the PRC. That referral was referenced nowhere on March 30th, but if you look at page 59 of tonight's packet, you'll see that in September of 2020, Police Review Commissioners Calavita, Chang, Leftwich, and Ramsey, and others voted for an exception to the tear gas ban for the special response team in extremely specific circumstances. Despite the PRC's vote, this proposal seems to have gotten lost in the bureaucratic shuffle. So the June 9th ban remains the law of the city to which the police department should conform its policy 303.6 concerning tear gas and its impact statements. But that does not get this board off the hook. As the successor to the Police Review Commission, the question is, should the PAB carry forward the unfinished work of the PRC? I think it should, which in this case means carrying forward the proposed exception to the ban, to the tear gas ban for the special response team. It's a fallacy to say that since tools like tear gas are used extremely rarely, twice in 20 years in Berkeley, I've heard, that they should simply be banned precisely because their use is so rare. That's no more logical than saying that because you touch the brake pedal so little during the typical drive that you should get rid of your brakes. Those systems are there for a reason, and this board would be well advised to listen to those reasons. Now, as a civilian, I would be content with a statewide ban on tear gas. But as long as it is not banned in California, our police risk finding themselves without any mutual aid because other agencies will not obey Berkeley's policy. It's not a question of forbidding other agencies from using their tools in Berkeley. It's whether outside agencies will come if called. You can read more about this concern in the memo, but all I'll say is that the 2024 presidential election is approaching at 3,600 seconds per hour and carries the same risk as the 2020 election. When this board considers the effect on mutual aid, it should include the possibility that mutual aid may not show up. And I ask, what then for our police department? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. And who is our next speaker?
Kit Saganor.
Hello, Ms. Aguilar, would you like to proceed?
Thank you very much for taking my comment. I want to comment on item 10C, which is the proposed change to policy 311.6 that has been referred to you. And I sent you an email about this, and so I won't try to repeat everything that's in that email. But I want to suggest that I think the policy is based in large part on a misunderstanding. The writing of this draft was preceded by a discussion at City Council several weeks ago. I don't know if you listened to that, but the question of, are parolees subject to search and under what circumstances? There was a lot of confusion expressed at City Council about under what circumstances parolees could be searched, to the point at which one of the council members asked the police officer who was part of that discussion, well, is it reasonable suspicion or is it probable cause? And the police officer, the Berkeley police officer, mistakenly said, oh, right now it's probable cause is what you have to search someone who's on parole. And that, of course, is not at all the case. It's only a reasonable suspicion. So that's one confusion. I think that's part of what the draft that you got this evening. The other piece that I think is confused in the draft that you got is that there seems to be a misunderstanding of the role of the role of parole agents and probation officers. The idea that, well, nobody's going to be able to figure out what's going on with somebody who's on probation or parole unless we can search them, of course, is not at all the case. The person's parole officer or probation officer is keeping tabs on that person. It's their job to do it. You really don't want the Berkeley police to take on that role along with the other roles that they have. So I think that you will be looking very carefully at this document as you look very carefully at every document. There's one more thing I want to bring back to your attention, and I'm actually going to read it to you. This is a slide that you saw on March 23rd, less than a month ago, when you were given training on what it is that the police department currently does in terms of warrantless searches of probationers and parolees. And this example was given. Officers conduct a traffic stop in the Berkeley Hills at 3 a.m. and learn that the driver is on parole for PC 211 robbery. The parolee doesn't have a viable reason for being in the Berkeley Hills at this hour. The officer is aware that the area has been plagued with catalytic converter thefts in recent weeks. Exercising the parolee's search conditions would be appropriate and within policy. So, in fact, the current policy provides ample opportunity to search when there is some reason for a search to be conducted. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, and next we have Mansoor Eddin. Mr. Eddin?
Yes, thank you. First of all, I just want those of you on the board that was not on the PRC to know that members of the Berkeley community, BPD officers and city staff work many hours to develop Berkeley's policy regarding parole and probation. Asking a probation or parolee status at the beginning of an encounter without any justification is unjust and unreasonable, and is also racist and inhumane. Do Berkeley Police Department want to go back to the good old days when they asked people, are you on parole or probation, when stopped in cars or on feet? I think that we should give this policy a chance to work. As we were in the process of developing the policy, we were very lucky that the city of Oakland went first. They passed their policy, exactly what we were pursuing, and gave us a benchmark to go by. I think that we should let this policy move forward and let it work. It's working in Oakland, and why won't it work in Berkeley? There's much more crime in Oakland than it is in Berkeley. We need to have a humane policy related to parole and probation, and I hope you move forward and make sure that we keep this policy in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Rivka Palatnik.
Thank you. So I am a public member of the Director Search Subcommittee, and I want to say that we really need support from the whole PAB because we're having difficulties in fulfilling our role in the way we expected to be able to do it. So most immediately, we were supposed to have input and review the brochures to advertise the position. And we did get to see the text part, and they did incorporate some of our suggestions. But then they sent us the final version, which the photos that are featured are really big photos in the brochure, are virtually all of smiling police people. It comes across as a brochure to recruit someone in the police department, as you know, as if this position is part of the police. And we're very concerned that this sends the wrong message, and we want to get those photos changed, even though the brochure is already out. And we'd appreciate support from the whole PAB for that matter. And then beyond that, we're very concerned that we're not getting the input that we hoped for, expected, and were promised early on, that we would be involved at every step of the process, but that hasn't been spelled out. We don't know what's happening with the process. We don't know whether we'll be allowed to have meaningful input, and that involves the review of the applicants, the narrowing down to a smaller group that we're interested in, the decision as to who to interview, and then participating in the interviews. And we had been led to believe we would have a meaningful role at each of those steps, but I'm very concerned that that's not going to happen. And this is part of a larger pattern that the PAB is being overlooked, not included, undermined for the new powers that it's supposed to have. So I just hope that the PAB can stand up for its full powers, and that policies need to come through the PAB. For example, Council Member Terry Taplin's proposal for a flex team policing unit should have been reviewed by the PAB. It still badly needs to be reviewed by the PAB, but I'm losing confidence that these things that are supposed to happen are going to happen. So I hope you'll fight for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Elliot Halpern.
Hello, yes. Thank you. I'm following up on with Mansour Dean, who we work closely with when the PRC instituted the current parole probation policy. This policy was negotiated over many weeks some years ago, and the reason that we were concerned is we were doing anecdotal work in the community, the NAACP and the ACLU, and specifically Mansour and myself, for the fair and impartial policing complaints that were coming to the NAACP. And constantly we heard that every African American that was stopped was asked if they were on parole. And if they did say they were searched. But the police have the authority to do that. So after much negotiation, this policy, the current policy, was created, and it created it was a step in bringing the bias policing down in Berkeley, and much dignity, more dignity to the Black community. So I don't understand why there's even any consideration of change. One or two cases may have slipped through the crack, but I'm sure they slipped through before also. And as far as we know, this policy, the current policy is working. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other members of the public that would like to speak? It appears there are no others. So I'm going to stop my sharing. And we are going to shift into item 4, approval of minutes. March 23rd, 2022 minutes, regular meeting. Any comments, edit to that?
I move they be approved.
Someone second? Who got that second? Great. Board Member Moore seconded. Any questions or comments on the March 23rd? Not hearing or seeing any. Let's move on to March 30th, 2022. Any changes, edits? I'm not seeing nor hearing any. Motion to approve the minutes?
Move to approve the minutes.
I think Board Member Harris, and then seconded by Board Member Calavita. Okay. We have an update from the chair and board members' reports. For myself, I don't have really anything to report other than that to thank everybody for continuing with their hard work and all these subcommittees. Again, that we're going through a time period of a lot of change, that we're, we all know that we're trying to establish important authority with regard to the independence of the Police Accountability Board and the transparency, and also continuing to develop our relationship with the BBD and other stakeholders, including the members of the public whom we serve. I appreciate everybody's hard work. And I know it's a lot of time, and we also are again looking at the relatively imminent retirements of both Investigator Norris, who I want to thank for all of his hard work and his input on our committee meetings, and also Interim Director Lee. So that's not too far around the corner, and we will be saddened when they do retire, but also we want to prepare for that as much as we can beforehand. So that's my goal in terms of the interim, to try to prepare us for that pretty dramatic shift when that occurs. Board Member Calavita, would you like to provide an update on the police chief search?
Sadly, I don't have an update because I haven't heard anything about where that is. We haven't had any recent meetings. I assume that the recruitment is ongoing, and I will probably have an update for you at our next meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Director Lee, have you heard anything, or Sergeant Turner? Are there any updates on this?
I have not, and that's Lieutenant Turner.
I'm sorry, Lieutenant Turner, I apologize. Lieutenant Turner, are there any updates on the?
I don't have any.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Mizell is not here. Is there someone who wants to speak on his behalf, who's on the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force?
If I may, Chair, I did hear from him. He said he would be about 15, 20 minutes late.
Okay.
What I can tell you about Reimagining is that there was going to be a work session with council tomorrow, and that has been postponed to next Thursday, April 21st. It's a presentation from the city manager, I believe, to the council about the recommendations that came from the task force and also for the National Institute for Criminal Justice Reform.
Okay.
And if, I'll let Vice Chair Mizell know that if he has anything further report to let me know, and then I can let you know.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to 6, the director's report.
Yes, thank you, Chair. First, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Beniba Thomas to introduce herself to you all. Her first day was Tuesday, and that was yesterday. And Byron and I were very happy to have her, and I'll let her have the floor to let her tell you about her background and her interest in this work.
Hi, I'm just glad to be on board. I wanted to let you know that I was a PRC board member years ago for Oakland. And so I've had an interest in these subjects, and it's good or bad to see that some of the same issues you're still dealing with, such as the, parole or probation, or, that always got me. I was always an issue for me, but probation or parole. But anyway, I'm so glad to be here. And I've worked with the Berkeley group before on a big project about 5 years ago. So I'm really delighted to come on board as even a temporary investigator. I have a law degree. I practiced I went to school at Georgetown, and I was a litigator for a couple of big firms in San Francisco for a while. So thank you.
Well, welcome aboard, and we're really excited to have you on, and look forward to getting to know you too.
Okay, thank you, Beniba.
Thank you.
Continuing with, somebody say something?
I was just saying, welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Okay. Continuing with my report, we had one new case filed since our last meeting. I did include an updated case status report in your packet. So that actually covers everything that's been filed since July 1. We realized we hadn't given you that snapshot before now. So it doesn't include the case that was filed today. And let me know if you have any questions about it, either now or individually. As you know, the recruitment for the permanent director has begun. I have heard that Buyers Group has already had several candidates who have expressed interest, so that's good. I wanted to let you know that I think for the next meeting, we will be having a training on the Traffic Bureau, and as well as commendations. I will see how much room we have on that agenda. I know we have a lot tonight, and some might get carried over, but I have had commendations sitting on my desk from 2021 for quite some time, waiting to bring them to you, and I just don't feel like I can wait any longer. You do provide for, you have a process that you approved in the standing rules, and the charter does require that the board set up a commendation program, which I believe that you have fulfilled by having it in your standing rules, but now you should actually carry that out. And I have been talking to Mr. Norris about how to facilitate that and make that a faster thing. The PRC members will recall we get a stack that's something like this a couple times a year, and it is a little, takes time for every person to go through every single one. So we might try to do some groundwork and maybe point out specific ones for you for particular commendation, help that process along. Speaking of the next meeting, I want to ask about possibly rescheduling. So your next regular meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, and that's because Wednesday is Holocaust Remembrance Day, Wednesday the 27th. And all boards and commissions were asked to avoid this list of holidays at the beginning of the year, and that is one that you were decided to change from your regular Wednesday. But what's happened now is that the council is scheduled to hear the ALPR use policy on the 26th. So there's a question about whether we should postpone. Well, it would be canceling the regular meeting on the 26th and setting a special meeting on the 27th, but it would be your regular business meeting on the 27th that you would have had on the 26th. So I wanted to get a feel from people about that.
It's fine with me.
Mhm. Okay.
All right, Kathy, so what's the proposed date?
The proposed date is Wednesday, the 27th, which would be your regular day.
Okay.
So, yeah, what the direction that came from the clerk's office at the beginning of the year was to avoid the holidays if possible. Now, if it's not possible, it's not possible. So, but I just wanted I wanted your input on that. Board Member Calavita?
I would be in favor of having it on the Wednesday, because I think it's important that someone, maybe you, Kathy, and the chair would be at the council meeting when they discuss ALPRs.
Mm-hmm. I don't remember if you actually authorized the chair to speak, but I think since you sent a letter, it would be appropriate for him to speak, and as long as he expresses the opinions of the board as stated in the letter.
Could we in any case do that authorization tonight?
Well, it's not agendized, but I think you could, I think it's fine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, and I can certainly speak to it as well if necessary.
Yeah.
Okay, let me put it this way. Is there anybody who opposes moving or canceling the regular meeting and of the 26th and setting a special meeting for the 27th to conduct our regular business? No. Okay, then I will do that. So your next meeting will be in 2 weeks on Wednesday. Thank you. And the last thing I have is a question. Is there anybody else who's not getting a packet by Monday? You should be getting it Saturday. We mail them on Thursday specifically so you can get them. So there's a chance you could get them on Saturday. Can you raise your hand if you get it on Saturday usually? 1, 2, 3. Okay, how about Monday? Okay, people are getting it after. Well, I know Board Member Owens got her packet today. So, all right, I'm just checking if anybody else is experiencing getting packets later than Monday. If you could just let me know, shoot me an email. I just learned that Board Member Owens is having a chronic problem, and her packet went to Sacramento, and that's why he gets her today. I don't know why. I don't know what issue I could raise with the post office, but I think I should try to do something about it. Or have Ms. Martinez try to contact the post office, because that doesn't make any sense. So, okay, that is it for me, Chair. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Oh, and Vice Chair Mizell is here, and Vice Chair Mizell, if you had anything to report about reimagining, I did announce that the work session has been set for Thursday, the 21st of April with council.
Yes, thank you, Director. That's pretty much all I have to announce on that.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Off to the next item for the Chief of Police's report with Lieutenant Taylor.
Turner.
Oh, it's Turner. That's okay.
I'm sorry, Turner.
No worries. Good evening, everyone. From the chief, for staffing, no additional hires since our last meeting. We have one retirement coming April 18th, so next week. After the retirement, we'll have 155 sworn with 5 people in the academy and 4 currently in training. We currently have, in terms of our retirement, those who can retire, we have 15 officers that are eligible to retire, 15 more who will be eligible within the next 2 years. And then over the course of the next 5 years, 51 of our 155 sworn officers will be eligible to retire. In terms of our department projects, we're continuing to work with the city manager on responses and proposals related to reimagining public safety. And second is the department has completed the initial submission of the police equipment and community safety ordinance item to the clerk for the city council meeting on May 10. As part of the material submitted, we included the PAV's letter to the chief on the impact statements in its entirety. We will have some information about the PAV suggestions, which the chief will share with PAV as soon as they are complete. Also, as soon as the material submitted clear the city manager review, Interim Chief Lewis will send Director Lee the annual use report, which is the only remaining item that the PAV has not yet received. We don't have any significant cases of interest from the last couple of weeks. I do want to just recognize this week as National Telecommunications Week, which recognizes our dispatch center and some of the unseen folks in there who do a great job every day to keep our community safe. And that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions at this time? Let's move on to the subcommittee reports. With regard to 8A, we're going to move, so we had a bunch of agenda moves at the start. We moved 8A down to 10B to combine that. That's my understanding. And I'm going to take a break right now, but if someone, either Vice Chair Mizell could.
Chair, you actually moved that one as well.
We're moving that one as well.
So you can go right
Pop that
to,
down to 9B. Oh, that's right. So
you
we'll
can-
start with regulations then. Is that correct?
yes.
Okay. So regulations, I am chair of regulations. We just met last night and we're meeting again on the 31st and April 12th. So we've gone through a full cycle and then we're going through another cycle and carefully going through all the language again. Our hope is to be done at the final meeting of the 21st. We do want to engage with the BPD. Lieutenant Montgomery works very hard and comes to our meetings, and we want to make sure that we tie any loose ends together before bringing it back to the board. So it has been a very thorough process. There are a number of kind of questions we want to bring to the board, but we're trying to minimize that as much as possible and make all the final decisions that we can now.
Excuse me, Chair, if I could
Yeah.
just correct you. The next meeting is April 21st, and then you scheduled May
Oh, I apologize.
4th,
Yeah,
May 4th and May 6th.
that's right. May 4th and May 6th. So
So the subcommittee is working very hard and even scheduled a meeting on Friday, May 6th, so that it could get these, the draft to you.
yes. So we seek to complete everything by May 6th. Thank you. Are there, for other members of the Regs Committee, anything they want to add?
Berkeley PAB. Long day, huh?
Oh, good. Okay, he's on mute. Anyone else want to add anything to that? Nope.
No,
Okay, great. How about mental health issues, response and crisis stabilization?
Well, I should just say we're continuing to postpone our meetings. So there's nothing to report.
Yeah, thank you. Policy 351, fixed surveillance cameras.
That's board members Ramsey and Mizell.
We have not yet met. We should probably coordinate with you, Director Lee, afterwards about doing a first meeting.
Okay, I'll send another email.
Great, thank you. So, and F will be pushed down and combined with, and please tell me if I'm getting this right, 9C.
Yes.
Okay. So with regard to old business then, 9A, reviewing the policy of hate crimes as requested by the City Council. At page 13 of the February 23rd agenda packet.
Chair, at your last meeting, you had discussed at your last regular meeting, you were going through the definitions, and I believe you decided that you wanted to include all of the characteristics listed in the penal code. These are just examples, but what I recall is that you felt they should simply all be listed.
Yes.
And I can't remember if you decided you were done with that section.
So let's take a look at that really quickly on page 13. I thought that we had kind of put it aside because some members had felt they didn't have adequate time to review this. I might be wrong.
Chair, I thought we did get through the definitions, but I thought that we decided to add immigration status after nationality.
Okay. So that would be.
Am I correct, or did we decide not to?
So I'm honestly not quite remembering, though I would personally feel that it should be there, but Board Member Ramsey has his hand up.
Sorry, I lowered it. It wasn't important. I thought we determined that it was incorporated in the definition, but
Yeah.
already, but
So that's two people, and that's kind of in the back of my head. That's a recollection as well. But just since we're looking at it now, is that something that everybody is comfortable with?
You mean adding the immigration status?
Yeah,
Language.
but after nationality and before race or ethnicity, I guess that's where we were saying it would fit.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say I was ambivalent in the last meeting, but I agree that it should be added. I think it adds emphasis and clarity.
Okay, I agree too, because it's a specific protected classification in some other contexts, and you can imagine certain circumstances where that could be a motivation. And there was some conversation I recall between how much does nationality cover it, but immigration status is more specific, I think. Are there any questions about that?
I should just say that I'm looking at the penal code now, and the list in the penal code is exactly as it appears in this policy.
Right.
So
Without the immigration status.
yeah, so I don't know that we should change it if we're trying to be consistent with, I'm not sure why it was not included, but it's not at all the same thing.
Well, that's why I was ambivalent. However, if we're going to have a policy from Berkeley, it adds value and meaning to something that may be implied, and it is implied. I think, I don't have the language in front of me, but I read it carefully at the last meeting. It gives clarity to the policy that Berkeley has, and I think that has value.
Yes.
We just might want to tweak though the language if we decide to do that, so there isn't the suggestion, because it says in the parenthetical references to the penal code sections, so it sounds like the following, the categories that follow are part of the penal code, which I guess they are. So if we're going to add in immigration status, we might want to just make clear that that's not, something.
Always the case. Okay. Board Member Ramsey.
Yeah, I was just going to add, sort of building on what Board Member Lefford said, and I gotta say, I don't feel strongly about this. I'll probably abstain, but my tendency was to vote no on it just because it caused confusion. I think that when there are cross references within the policy, you don't want to start changing the definitions because it confuses whether you're using the definition in the penal code or you're using the definition in the policy. And then that causes confusion for other definitions, because where other definitions refer to the penal code or other state codes, people will then say, oh, wait a minute, it wasn't supposed to be exact. Look at the penal code one where they changed it. So that's why my tendency is to vote no on this, but I don't feel strongly about it and I may abstain.
Okay. So if we were to start from the principle that in Berkeley, because there is a high number of folks under the classification of immigration status, and that potentially there could be some kind of motivation on that basis that could be an enhancement for a crime, and we wanted that to be included somehow. If we start from that principle, then we're going to, as Board Lethbridge stated, have to modify that alignment with direct alignment with the penal code in the parenthetical somehow.
Or we could just delete the reference to the penal code. I don't feel strongly about it one way or the other either, but a simple way to deal with it would be just to get rid of the parenthetical references to the penal code.
So just for the kind of question about alignment and confusion issues, if we remove that parenthetical to the penal code up in 31.9.1.1, added in immigration status, would we need to remove references to the penal code in other sections across this policy 319?
I think so.
You don't think so? I think that in other sections is more specific, right? We just want to make sure that it's not triggering the issue of the definitions in terms of the scope of who falls under protections in the other references beyond the first section here. Board Member Ramsey, did you have a question?
No, I'm sorry if I hadn't lowered my hand. I just have the same issues. I just definitely remember the definition within the penal code included what we're talking about.
Since you have criminal law, experienced criminal lawyer, what if we were to remove that penal code and then just have immigration status added in because it's Berkeley for the reasons that were stated by previously by Board Member Levine? Do you think that would be something that would further would we clear up the issue that you stated about concern about confusion?
Yeah, I mean, if I was going to do it, I'd eliminate penal code only in that one instance. But with respect to that one section, like I said, I'm probably going to vote no, just because I think the cross-reference to the penal code sort of establishes a definition, which includes it. But that's the only reason why.
Sure. I'm okay with adding, I think it's important to add immigration status because it is Berkeley, is in the West Coast, it's in the Bay Area. And then for pragmatic reasons to remove the parenthetical. Board Member Owens?
So in section 422.56E of that penal code, it defines nationality and includes immigration status. So I'm comfortable with using the penal code in the definition and not modifying it. But I would suggest if we do decide to add immigration, that we just reference that section of the penal code that defines that piece. That way that we stay consistent throughout the document, that we just reference in the penal code where that falls in.
Yeah, that could be a good solution. So you mean like, so we now have a D immigration status, but for D, a parenthetical after D, referencing penal code, the section you just cited?
I mean, if the board feels strongly about including that, I think that's a way to do it and stay consistent with the penal code, because I think it's important that we stay consistent with the penal code.
Okay. So what are your thoughts? What are other people's thoughts on that? The suggestion from board member Owens. I think that makes sense. It'll be a little asymmetric in terms of the other, A, B, C, D, E, F don't have a parenthetical behind that, but it's because national origin is covered in this, immigration status is covered inside the scope of national origin, which in other cases it often is in terms of court interpretation. So I think that makes sense. Is there a motion for that? Do we need to do a motion, Director Lee, or is this something we're just gonna do by consensus?
Chair, could I ask, where are you finding this definition? I'm searching the penal code and I don't see it.
Sure, Board Member Owens.
422.56.
Yeah.
422.56 E.
Yeah.
It says nationality means country of origin, immigration status, including citizenship, and national origin. So that's where it's at, 422.56 E.
Do you see that, Board Member Calavita?
You all go on. I'm looking.
Okay.
I kind of thought we went through this before. I had the same discussion and realized it was already in there. So if it's already in there, maybe we could just add it, nationality and immigration status.
Cool,
If
thank
it
you.
is in fact in there, then we don't need to specifically reference it.
That's right. Board Member Ramsey has just shared the screen. Thank you. Nationality means country of origin, immigration status, including citizenship and national origin. This definition is declaratory of existing laws, 422.56 E. So that's we have it in the language there. So I think that makes a lot of sense to cite to that. And to add immigration status because we want to be specific in the language of our Berkeley hate crime law.
That's good.
Okay, great. Board Member Harris?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I agree. I mean, it's there, so it just makes sense just to cite that.
Okay, so Director Lee, I think you were going to say something about whether or not we needed to do this by motion or by consensus.
Well, I'd like some clarification.
Okay.
Because I don't mind doing it by consensus, but what's not clear to me is how it's being proposed to insert it. And I was thinking perhaps if it were a parenthetical after nationality saying which includes blah, 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 you can leave the penal code reference up at the top, because hate crimes, this is the Berkeley Police Department policy, and the preamble, purpose, and scope says that this
Meet or exceed, that's right.
can exceed. And so to put emphasis, at least parenthetically, where just the reference to the number doesn't articulate the significance that we want, to be added in the parenthetical and gives accurate reference to 422.5.
Like that idea.
Yeah.
I think that's simpler and because I think it would be kind of odd to call out one section only on that and not on the other. So I think a parenthetical that parallels the definition in the code is an easy way to do it.
Okay, so I want to make sure that's what Board Member Levine is asserting.
Yeah,
So-
the parenthetical coming after the word nationality. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So can we, Board Member Ramsey, can we read that language out loud to Director Lee so we're able to put that in there directly? Okay, thank you. So it'd be after C nationality would be parentheses with including, do we need to put the country? No, including immigration status.
Which,
citizenship,
yeah.
And national origin.
Which includes.
Which includes,
Mhm.
which includes country of origin, immigration status, citizenship, and national origin.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Were you able to grab that, Director Lee? I think you're on mute.
I have it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Cool. Okay, so you know, we have allotted 30 minutes for this conversation. I know this is kind of a meaty issue, but are there any other, we've taken care of the definition. There's a definition of victim that we probably want to take a quick look at. There's reference to the Matt Shepard and James Byrd Hate Crimes Prevention Act right above, which includes sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability. And then victim includes, but is not limited to, a community center, educational facility, entity, family, group, individual, office, meeting hall, person, place of worship, private institution, public agency, library, or other victim or intended victim of the offense. It's obviously intended to be fairly broad, though it does specify, and it says is not limited to, while it does specify those various sites. There could be physical sites that could be victimized, and these are based upon historic experiences around hate crimes. Are there any comments about that? Yes, Board Member Leftwich.
Just wondering if, to expedite things rather than going through this section by section, if you could just ask if anybody has concerns, other concerns about any of it, because I personally don't, but if somebody does, maybe they could just point us towards their concerns.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. I think that the victim looks good, and that signifies the kind of general intent behind this policy. But are there any other, is that a good way to go with this, everybody? Shall we just, okay. Does anyone we have other sections here, which I'm just going to call them out. So first we have the purpose, then we had the definition, then we have the policy, then there's prevention and preparation. There's definition of hate crime versus hate incident. There's a review of the criminal statutes, the relevant criminal statutes. Then there's investigations. Then there's supervisor responsibility, detective bureau responsibility, training, and finally the appendix. So just take a look at those sections and let us know if you have any comments on them or suggested changes.
I think it could be useful to hear from if Lieutenant Turner is still on the, whether this has been,
Yes.
whether this works well in practice.
Thank you, Lieutenant Turner, who helped to run the hate crimes task force for Berkeley.
We don't have a task force, but I was assigned to be sort of our point person on the referral itself. But
You're muted, Lieutenant. You're muted.
No, I can hear her, but softly.
Okay, can you hear me better now?
I can hear, yeah.
That's better.
Can you ask the question again?
Just whether, I was interested in your perspective on the policy, whether you have any concerns or whether it works well as it's written, since you're on this.
We haven't come across concerns.
Okay.
Yeah.
And has it been have there been instances of this recently that where you've put this policy into practice?
I mean, anytime we have a hate incident or a hate crime, we're going to always reference the policy.
So this one is from, and Lieutenant Turner, sorry to interrupt. This one's from January. The copy is January 3rd, 2022. Was there an iteration of it previously that was similar, or is this pretty different from it?
Yes. As I mentioned before, the updates were to, there was the change in the assembly bill, and I don't have that in front of me because of the immigration status change. And sorry, I don't remember the other one, but that's why it was updated in the early part of this year. But it was very similar to what the document that you're looking at now.
Save for the updates. Thank you. Board Member Owens.
I just have a question for the lieutenant. is the checklist used when a hate crime is reported, and do you track the data that you collect on that checklist?
Yeah, so Community Services Bureau is on our data team, has been working on tracking that information. And so, yeah, that information does get tracked, absolutely.
Thanks.
I'll also add that one of the asks of the referral from City Council was to make public information about where, when we have hate crimes, and that we're working on our public data portal, and that's some of the information that will be included in there.
So that'll be,
It's not ready yet, but that's something that's in the works.
okay, thank you. Yeah, that's an important part because that falls under, is this the Detective Bureau responsibility? I mean, it's kind of a Detective Bureau, would that really apply to? It's under C, it says maintaining statistical data and tracking on suspected hate crimes as indicated for required reporting to the Attorney General.
Yeah, that's in terms of tracking the crime itself, and it's if cases are sent to court.
Okay.
But I'm talking about reporting out on the information so the public is aware.
Okay, just, yeah.
How often, how frequent, and things like that. That was an ask of the referral.
Okay, and that'll be part of the Transparency Hub?
Yes.
Okay, great. Who is responsible for gathering that data within the BPD?
It's our data team. I don't know the official name of what we're calling them, but yeah, our data analysts.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, it's helpful to have you here while we're talking about this. Any other comments or questions? Board Member Owens, you still have your hand up.
I have a question.
Oh, yeah, okay, you have a question. Board Member Owens has a question.
I had a question related to the hotline. Is the department or the city developing this hate crime hotline that's also mentioned?
So that was an ask of the Berkeley Mental Health Commission to review that. They, I don't believe they were able to staff a hotline, but what we've sort of fallen back on is that the county itself has a hate crime hotline. And so we want to utilize that. We want folks to be able to utilize that line, which is available to everyone.
Is that going to be posted to the Transparency Hub link?
As it's still in the works, so it certainly could be. Probably
Is that something we could?
Good idea to add in, sure.
Yeah, we could just flag that for the data people. Okay. And if it were called into the county hotline and it was relevant to the jurisdiction of the BPD, I would imagine there's a system in place, of course, that would trigger the BPD enforcement review.
Yeah, so people can call into that line and it goes to the district attorney's office, and they can get victim support there, or if appropriate, then the case would be sent to us.
Okay. Great. Any other questions?
No, I think it looks like it follows closely the penal code, so
Yeah. I don't have any other questions myself. If there are no other questions or suggestions, shall we have a motion to, I guess we'd move to approve with the immigration status, et cetera, parenthetical added in? Okay.
sounds good.
Cool. Who's gonna move it?
Move that we approve with the additions that we've discussed.
Great. Board Member Harrison, who's gonna second it?
I second.
Okay, Board Member Calavita. Any other comments or questions? Concern? Okay, so not hearing or seeing any, so moved.
Okay, so let's take a roll call on that, please, since you're voting on the whole policy.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for
Okay,
reminding
at
me.
first I thought you were just gonna vote on that one piece, which you didn't really do, but now that you're doing the whole policy, I think roll call is better. So
Okay.
on that motion, I'm calling the roll. Board Member Calavita,
Yes.
Chair Chang,
Yes.
Board Member Harris,
Yes.
Board Member Lefkovich,
Yes.
Board Member Levine,
Yes.
Vice Chair Mizell,
Yes.
Board Member Moore,
Yes.
Board Member Owens,
Yes.
and Board Member Ramsey.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you.
Great. Okay, let me see where so we were at 9A. And then now we're going to go to 9B. And Vice Chair Mizell is going to act for me while I take a break. And we're going to combine 8B and 9B together. Is that correct? Did 8B
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And there's another
Great.
reference.
And
Can we-
10A.
And we're going to add,
And 10A.
we're going to combine with 10A also.
That's right. Okay. So that's 8B,
Three lines.
8B, 9B, and 10A. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Yes. In that case, Board Member Levine, would you like to start with some remarks?
Sure. I just, I want to thank Rivka Polotnik, who spoke in the public section, who did a really very good job of summarizing what we had just discussed earlier this evening. We're very concerned that the brochure was given to us to edit, and we appreciated that. We put a lot of effort into it, which was incorporated to a large degree in the wording. But nobody told us there were going to be photographs, these in particular, added, nor were we given an opportunity to speak to them. It's not that the photographs aren't well framed and of attractive people, and I'm saying that because I think Lieutenant Turner is in one of those photographs, if my eyes are correct. The problem is the job is for the director of the Office of Police Accountability, a person who is part of the civilian oversight that Berkeley has reimagined through this charter amendment. And I'm trying to summarize what our last couple of meetings included, so Board Member Moore can correct me or add anything. But basically, we were told, and I think the board was told when this subcommittee was created, that we would have at each stage an opportunity to be heard about the hiring of this new director. And the first stage was the brochure. So when we were eliminated from the opportunity to be heard on the final brochure, which included a dramatic change from what we had been given to edit, it was a big blow, and we were pretty shocked and discouraged, and are here tonight to get support from the board as a whole to redirect and kind of get back to the promise that we were made. And from the public members in our subcommittee, these predate the swearing in of our new board. So these promises are that we will be heard, we'll have a voice in this whole process. So we lost that voice here. We want those photographs to be taken out, even though this may have been distributed. This is digital. This is the digital age. These can be easily eliminated. It's not a job that is hiring by the police department. It's not a police department job. It's civilian oversight. And if I give this brochure to somebody, I need to give them a disclaimer, because it's very clear from the photographs that what's being said is this is a job coming through the police department and for the police department. It's at complete odds with what the purpose and the wording says. I'm afraid we'll lose some very effective potential candidates with this as it stands. So we'd like the board to support some communication to the powers that be, that's the city, I think, here, and the buyers group who takes direction from them, because they wouldn't talk to me as the chair of this subcommittee. They directed me to the city, to the deputy city manager. So we would like the board to take a position requesting this change. And because we've been eliminated from this role, we want the board to help us restate our request to be a meaningful part here on out, reviewing resumes. And this isn't confidential. I used to do that when I worked for Contra Costa County. Names can be redacted, identities can be concealed. Well, we'd like to be part of this. This is a person who's going to be important to collaborate and work with us. And we'd like a voice. We won't have the final say, but I think we should be heard. So at each stage now, we'd like to have a meaningful role. And we'd like to be able to talk to the person who's going to give us that role and arrange it so it's effectively carried out. I think that's basically it. Board Member Moore.
I just wanted to add, for the sake of posterity, that Vice Chair Mizell did reach out to the city manager.
Yeah.
We did receive a response in writing that I think Vice Chair Mizell could go ahead and tell the whole board what kind of response we got, and then maybe it'll give the board a clearer picture of where we're at in this discussion that that we're looking for your support, openly asking for it. So,
Yeah.
Vice Chair.
Yes, just for the whole board's clarity. Yeah, I spoke with, so it was a phone call. I spoke with Deputy City Manager Bello earlier today on this issue. Her response to why these photos were selected for the brochure was that they showed the diversity of the city and the department, that they show obviously different ethnicities and backgrounds in the city, and that the officers in the pictures are all tenured officers in the force who have been here for a number of years, so are obviously permanent community and long-term community members. And along with the fact that there was a lack of photos of us as a board, which I think is something we're going to have to solve, and a lack of photos of staff in their day-to-day roles. She also mentioned, I asked, why could the brochure be changed? The answer was no. The brochure has been up for about 3 weeks now. And the answer was that would require reapproval, presumably from the city manager, possibly from the city council, to take it down and update the photo, and that was not realistic given where we are in the process now. She did agree with me that we should have more photos of the board and the staff, so we can actually have something to put on future brochures, future pamphlets, whatever it may be, and that there were already several, at least resume-wise, qualified candidates. I have no details on them, but several candidates who have already applied are in the process, are moving towards the screening process, which we should, again, have a role in, and that's what I was told directly from the deputy city manager. So let's go into questions. And I think it was Commissioner Leftwich first.
Yeah, well, that was going to be my question, what the city had said. I'm kind of surprised and don't agree with their response at all. So I would support the request that the board ask officially that the cover be changed. And I think it's not rocket science. You could put a picture of the Campanile on it and it's Scales of Justice or something. I don't think it has to be pictures of us or of staff necessarily. I mean, that's fine too, but it doesn't seem to me like it should be such a big deal. And I'm kind of surprised that they didn't seem to understand our concerns.
Yeah, the main reason I got was that it had already been up and it would require taking it down and putting it back up in some form. Again, that doesn't change the digital aspect of switching a photo, which I could do for free in about 2 minutes, but there may be some bureaucracy there. But no, thank you, board member. Board member Calavita.
So who was responsible for putting the brochure together with the photographs? Was it the buyers group or was it the city manager's office?
Nobody told us.
To my understanding of my conversation, it was the buyers group, though this flyer was ultimately approved at the city manager level. So this did go by the city manager. It was approved. I believe the buyers group put together the flyer and likely asked the city for photos. And this is what they either were given or decided on.
It really strikes me that the buyers group is not clear on what this position is. I think the buyers group thinks that it's housed in the police department. In any case, I would very much support switching out this photograph. And I think that we should be more specific in terms of not just saying in the future that the PAB needs a meaningful role, but I think we should specify, you're more familiar, I don't know the exact next steps that are going to happen. We should specify that at each one of those steps, we would, you as the subcommittee would have a role.
Yeah, that would certainly be ideal. And certainly I think a request of, anything we write tonight should be to, again, provide clarity on where they believe we're involved in this process. Do we obviously agree with their understanding of that, and whether we can push back on that? But I think part of it has been that misunderstanding, when they will actually come to us for feedback and when they will just, have their own prerogative. But then we have run into issues like this. So thank you, board member. Board member Harris.
I think I vaguely remember seeing the brochure, but is it possible to show the brochure?
It's in the packet.
It's in the packet. It's on page 23.
Can anybody put it up on screen?
Thank you.
Thanks.
This is the cover.
Okay.
The reason it's important to change the photographs is because there are police review processes. And so to conclude that this is within the police department is very reasonable.
Yeah.
I've had people from who I know from other cities say, "Oh, are you part of the police department, the new Police Accountability Board?" And I have to explain, no, this is civilian oversight. So it's not completely off the wall. There's a whole process for making complaints to the police. We have it in Berkeley. So
could we authorize the subcommittee to write the letter with regard to the meaningful participation in the next steps?
I would say that's meaningfully related to this item that we could do that, but let's hear from the other board members first here. Our Director Lee, do you have a comment?
Oh, yes, thank you. I was going to say, when you were speaking of Ms. Bello saying it had the city manager's approval, I had actually communicated with the buyers group and Ms. Bello, but I heard back from the buyers group first, and they said, well, it was approved by the mayor and the council. And then when I had a subsequent conversation with Ms. Bello, she told me the same thing. So I just wanted people to know that.
So I think
that doesn't sound
logically those would, well, I should say, I think those would add up if it went to the city manager, they said, sure, and then send it to council. So I think that may be the bureaucratic issue. I'm not 100% clear, but I think there's the bureaucracy where it had to go to council because I know whenever there's outside material on behalf of the city, there's a process where it has to go to council. So I think that's probably what took place from that description. Board Member Ramsey.
Thanks. I mean, like, I generally agree that these pictures are not what you'd want ideally to reflect citizen oversight, but I also don't want to chase windmills. And if this can't be changed, I don't really see why we would use our political capital to try to argue about this, and particularly not if the city council approved it, because if the city council approved it, I don't think it's our place right now to be questioning that. So those are my thoughts on voting no on this, only because of that. But I don't think they're good pictures to reflect what the position is, but it is what it is.
What
Thank you.
about in the alternative, if I can make a suggestion out of order here? What in the alternative if we request clarity about our role going forward and use this as an example of why we're concerned?
I think that'd be very appropriate.
We did discuss this in our subcommittee. So there is agreement that with you, Board Member Ramsey, that this is of concern, very serious concern, but really what we want is to be part of what's coming up here.
Board Member Owens.
I was essentially going to say what Board Member Ramsey just said. I feel like it's done, it's behind us. We as a board don't have the time, as far as I'm concerned, to talk about what happened in the past. It's out there. And I was looking through it, it's going to close on the 29th. So by the time they can find the pictures, change the pictures, it pretty much is going to be a closed application period. So to me, I wouldn't spend the time or effort to change these photos. Are they the best photos? No, they're not. But they are there, we live with them. I think it's more important as a board that we focus our efforts on making sure that the board remains part of the process. And I think that's where our energy should be, and not worry about those pictures. The pictures are what they are. And I definitely think it's appropriate that the board steps up and says, we want to be part of the process of the selection.
Yeah,
so that's where I'm at.
Okay, is it possible, or would the board be in support of a letter from the board saying we need to be part of this process going forward?
I personally would not support that, because I don't think this is the thing to spend our political capital on in that regards. We have a lot of places where we're saying that we need to be involved. And also, from what it sounds like, we were involved. We just weren't involved with the pictures. So to me, this is not the fight to have. I mean, I don't want to, be the boy who calls wolf all the time. I mean, this is not exactly the boy who calls wolf, because it really is an issue here, but this doesn't seem like the place to spend our political capital.
Yeah, and I'll just mention for board members that my conversation was today, and we had already obviously had to agendize this item as it was, without having a clear response from folks in the city. Board Member Owens.
So my understanding is the board is part of the process. The board may not be happy about how much of the process they're a part of, but the board is being included in this process. The board was able to review the brochure, the verbiage prior to it going out, and suggest changes. And my understanding is some of those changes were incorporated. So it sounds like to me the board is part of this process, maybe not at the level they'd like to be. But so I'm comfortable with the way things are. I'm not sure what more the board wants in this process. What more? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what more the board wants to do with this process?
Well, I think the subcommittee wants is to be part of the selection process. That is we were told in our initial meeting that we would be able to review the candidates at some point and to participate in their selection by recommendation. Clearly, we're not hiring, neither is the buyers group, but they do some filtering and we want to be part of that.
So are they telling you not going to be part of it? I mean, if you were told that you
No,
would be, are you
no,
being?
they're not, but they aren't telling us anything. See, the buyers group won't talk to me, won't talk to the members of this board, because we're not the hiring party. So that leaves us with the people who are making the timeline, doing the interviews, sorting through the resumes, separate from the people who are making final decisions. And so there's a disconnect here.
But the people making the final decision is the mayor and council, correct? The buyers group aren't making. Who's making the final decision on the hiring? It's not the buyers group, they're just the recruitment.
No, it's the city.
Right.
The mayor and the council.
It's the
Mayor and the
council.
council. That's who the position report to. So it's the mayor and the council, right?
But they're not doing the everyday stuff. I'm just concerned, and the committee's concerned, the subcommittee, that we need kind of to reinsert ourselves into this process, because if we don't have clarity on when the applications are being reviewed, who's reviewing them, what are the criteria, for the selection, we were heard like the community was heard. We would like somebody like this, that, and the other thing, but it's different when you have the specific resumes in front of you with people's experience and stated desires and reason they want to do this. It's very different when you get down to the actual hiring process. And that's what's not clear, how we're going to be a part of it. So I guess we're just trying to reinsert ourselves into what we were told we would be a part of. And I thought that a letter in support of these requests would help with that. I don't mean to make it a big political battle. I just think trying to voice our concerns that decisions not be made without including us.
Yeah, and Board Member Levine and Board Member Owens, I agree with both points you made. Yes, we definitely are and should be a part of the process. Yes, that's what was reconfirmed to me by the Deputy City Manager today. But to your point, Board Member Levine, we really don't have any clear timeline or anything written at all that gives us any idea of when or how that will take place. I think maybe if everything had been working perfectly and our communication all been perfect, maybe we wouldn't need that. But I think given the fact that we have this smaller issue in terms of communication between the city, the buyers group, the board, the subcommittee, it may be worth having the letter, not necessarily again harping too much on this, but mentioning this was an issue for us, focusing on establishing the timeline going forward and establishing clarity on what parts of the process they believe will be involved in or should be involved in, and what parts we're just not going to be. Because I don't think we've had, at least since the beginning of the subcommittee, that type of conversation or that type of clarity about what our involvement in the process will be. There's been very much like, yes, you'll be a part of the screening, you'll be a part of this and that, but if it doesn't materialize, or if the timing's off, or if a meeting schedule's off, and they say, well, we have to go forward without the board, we want to have that timeline in place so we understand why.
Can I move to call the question?
Yes, we can put that motion. We can continue discussion, but I'll recognize the motion. Is there a second?
What was the motion
Is
exactly?
to
Because I
close,
was,
it's just close discussion on this and move to call the question. So if someone's going to file a motion to send a letter that we just decide.
I just wanted to clarify though, I'm totally in support of it and I don't think it's wasting political capital, especially if we're just asking for clarification. So I would support, I'm just worried about timing. So if it could come from the subcommittee to the city manager, I guess if that's the right person it should go to, I would say, let's authorize that, but not slow things down by it being a letter from the board and then we have to review it. So I'm not clear exactly about that, but I agree with Vice Chair Mizell, what he was saying about this.
Board Member Calavita.
So I agree with both Board Member Ramsey and Owens, and also I agree with everyone. But I do think that a letter could be written by the subcommittee, if that is allowable, that asks for clarity on the timeline, because it sounds like you haven't been able to get the buyers group to respond to you. And so what you need is a timeline, and just in the process of doing that, ask for or state that you're continuing to look forward to work closely in this process, including the screening, blah, blah, blah. So I think it can be written in such a way that is consistent with Board Member Ramsey's and Owen's concerns about using political capital. This is simply asking for clarity on timeline, and you're looking forward to continue to work with them in a meaningful way.
Why wouldn't Ms. Lee just reach out to the Human Resources Department and ask them the timeline?
That would be an idea. What do you think, Director Lee?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, the idea being that instead of a letter coming from the subcommittee, which I think is not kosher anyway, that you could reach out to HR and find clarity on the timeline and next.
I don't think HR is involved at this point. I think really it's a recruitment that the city has hired the buyers group for.
So the buyers group would be the appropriate entity to inquire.
Right. And I think, I don't know if they're going to talk to me, but I could try. I could certainly talk to Ms. Bello or ask Ms. Bello to, have a conversation with them both at the same time, if that's what it takes.
Yeah, I would, perhaps suggest, we wouldn't have to take action tonight, but allowing the subcommittee the opportunity to, draft a letter. There we go, draft a letter with this basis of discussion that we've discussed tonight. I know it will take more time, but come back at our next regular meeting with that item on the agenda, with a letter already in place. The board can obviously then discuss the contents, the merits, the capitalization, whatever needs to be changed, and that could be submitted. I do agree, obviously, the fastest way would be just to ask, but I feel like we've already gone the just ask route, and we've had difficulty as a subcommittee getting clear answers. Again, I don't think anything's deliberate there. I think there's just, when you have 3 different entities trying to monitor or watch something or have different component parts in it, if one is not communicating great, or if there's miscommunication, stuff in the city just kind of goes by the wayside. At least that was my experience with the reimagining process, where it's a lot of work to work with the outside entity, plus the city, plus the board, in this case, plus the subcommittee. So I would recommend that, which allows us to move on tonight, gives us the time to draft something on these topics and have it presented at our next meeting.
I would support that.
Okay, Board Member Harris.
Yeah, just really quick. It just seems to me though that there may have been some misunderstanding as to what role the board would actually play in this whole thing. So in addition to the timelines, I think that the board needs to inquire as to what role do you really play? Because with them putting the brochure out the way that it's done, you obviously the board wasn't involved in that. So there may be some, some things that we we are misunderstanding that, and what our place is with this whole thing. So that might be something, a need for clarification there as well.
I definitely agree, Board Member Harris. There's certainly a difference between, as we know, them having the power to just do something versus them sending it to review and then taking action we may not agree with. And I think that's the distinction that we haven't had a clear answer on in this process yet. But yeah, thank you. Okay, so are we as a board okay then to move on and allow us as a subcommittee to have the opportunity to draft something for the board?
We get a roll call vote.
Yeah, could you put that in the form of a motion, please?
The motion, okay. I move to, well, I guess, can we direct this or to allow the subcommittee? Authorize. I motion that we authorize the subcommittee the ability to draft a letter on behalf of the board addressing the issues of timeline and responsibilities in the recruitment and ultimately hiring process of the Director of Police Accountability. I think that's all I need.
I second that.
And then obviously return to the board for full approval.
For clarity, this would go to the buyers group?
That's a better question. I would think.
It would go to the buyers group and the city manager.
Yeah, I would think it would go to both.
Isn't it going to be almost time for them to make offers by the time this gets sent out?
So to me, it would be very clear that if they don't already have that timeline plan or, outline for us, really that's what it is, then we will send that message as we need to. But you're not wrong, Board Member Levine. We'll be very close by then.
Yeah, the deadline is the end of the month, right? So there should be some time after that, for sure.
Yeah, it doesn't close till the 29th.
What's the problem with just having a conversation with whoever the appropriate person is in the city, in the next week or two, and find out what the role is of the board and the subcommittee, what the timeline is, what's wrong with just having a conversation? Why do we have to send out a formal letter?
But my response would be, because I'll keep that motion on, is, ultimately, I feel we already went the talk and find out route. Other subcommittee members, tried to initiate conversation with the buyers group, didn't really get an answer. Obviously, I've now spoken directly to the deputy city manager. Obviously, I did get an answer, but not a full.
But the buyers group is not part of the city. The buyers group is a paid entity to do the recruitment, so they wouldn't.
I understand that, board member, but where the responsibilities begin and end needs to be clear to us as a board, and it's not our responsibility to have to search out any random person in the city to try to find that answer. It is ultimately the city's job to provide us that answer when it deals with responsibilities that fall under the board. So my point would just be, I want just clarity. That's why I'm not looking for this to be an aggressive or punishing letter. But, I don't think it's our responsibility to have to ask more people to find out the answer that should have already been provided.
Let me just add, I'm sorry, but, I wrote to Deputy City Manager Bello, and she wrote me a really nice message back. We corresponded that was very collegial and very helpful to communicate with her. When you communicated today, it was just about the brochure. But what if we just forget the brochure and move forward? Should I, if I'm the chair of this subcommittee, can I just do that? It might be more expeditious, as Board Member Owens is suggesting. And then if that doesn't work, we can do a letter or something.
Well, yeah, that's right. I'm not opposed to, right? If we come back 2 weeks from now, folks, and the answers are clear, I'm not going to say, just push the letter. But if it's not clear, we need to tonight say what we're doing and have a motion. That's why I'm phrasing it this way.
I'm sorry.
But of course, I'm totally fine with us trying to have that way. I just want to make sure we have this on the books as well. if we don't have a clear answer 2 weeks from now.
Okay.
Okay, Board Member Harris.
I'm sorry. I'll lower my hand.
Okay, Director Lee, do you have my motion? I know it was a minute ago
Yes,
now.
to
Okay.
authorize the subcommittee to draft a letter on behalf of the board addressing the issues of the timeline and responsibilities of recruitment and hiring of director of police accountability.
Okay, and I will commit to the board to try and schedule another conversation with the deputy city manager to get more details, but we will see if we get a full response.
Vice Chair, could I ask if maybe
Yes.
Board Member Levine's proposal could be a friendly amendment to what you were saying? In other words, she, as chair of the subcommittee, reach out to Ms. Bello by email or telephone or however, if she feels comfortable doing it, and get answers to those questions and report back at our next meeting, and put that letter on hold and do it informally for now, given that she already has a good rapport.
Sure, I have no issue with that.
Okay, that would be, I think that would be,
I feel more comfortable with that too.
yes.
Okay, I'll accept that amendment.
Does the seconder accept that?
Who's that?
Board Member Moore?
I do.
Okay, thank you.
Can somebody clarify for me where we're standing? Is the motion that Subcommittee Chair Levine is going to reach out to the Assistant City Manager to have either a phone discussion or a written discussion about the role that the subcommittee and board plays? So is that the motion, or is the motion that she will be doing that, but there also is going to be a letter?
That's I understand that as an amendment to the main motion. So that Board Member Levine will reach out to the Deputy City Manager, report back at the next meeting. And I think if necessary.
Can we add like in the absence of a clear response?
And in the absence of a clear response, then authorize the subcommittee to draft a letter.
And I believe that was your intent, Board Member Calavita. So
Yes, it was. Yes, that's
okay,
it.
yeah.
Okay. Is it, let me raise this question. I'm not supposed to be making motions, but I'm trying to clarify for you. I think I heard Board Member Levine say she was going to report back at the next meeting, but if she doesn't get a satisfactory response, do you want to just authorize her to go ahead with the letter rather than waiting to come back to the next meeting saying?
Yeah, that's
yes,
good.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Are people clear on that now?
And I'm going to call the question. I just time check. We're 8:45.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, I am going to call the roll on that motion as amended.
Sorry.
Okay.
Board Member Harris, I'm sorry. Do you have a question?
I
You're
just want
muted.
to ask her real quick about the letter. So if she doesn't get a response and they're going to send a letter, will the board be able to review that letter before it's sent, or is it just going to be sent?
Oh, good
So
question.
I think we'll have to come back to the next meeting and make a decision, right?
Not like in the week, but I think Director Lee, were you saying to allow her to draft the letter with the subcommittee so we can have it agendized for our next meeting to send forward? That was my understanding. of the
Okay.
change.
That's not what Kathy said.
Okay,
So
that's a good point.
Yeah.
Board Member Harris. Because the original motion was to have it come back.
When's our next meeting?
April 27th.
27.
Yeah.
I still think there's time.
Yeah.
There'll still be time because.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
I think that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll be coming back if there's no satisfactory answer from Ms. Bello. And if there is, then there'll be simply a report back at the next meeting, right?
That's good.
And there could be a one-way communication. Board Member Levine can ask me or
I
forward
will.
me And then I
will,
can
for
send
sure.
it out to you all and you can have it. You can't discuss it, but you could know what had happened. Okay,
Yeah.
on the motion, Calavita,
Yes,
Chang,
Since I was taking a break, I'm going to abstain. Thanks.
Harris,
Yes.
Lefwich,
Yes.
Levine,
Yes.
Mizell,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Owens,
I'm gonna abstain.
okay, and Ramsey.
Vote no. Just clear for the record, though, shouldn't Board Member Chang recuse himself rather than abstain?
Question, since I've been
What's
out,
what would be the, recusing mean he would not, I don't know, is there a difference?
Yes, not participate.
how about I recuse myself?
Okay,
Thanks, Board Member
okay,
Ramsey.
motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, and then are you going to vote on the brochure issue or not?
We don't need to. I don't believe at this time. But Board Member Levine, you did agendize it. Do you want to vote on it or?
No.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay. Then I think we are on to 9C.
Are we gonna discuss on 9B, they also talk about being part of hiring the investigator?
Yeah.
Right,
Are we gonna
Yes.
discuss that or not?
thank you. That's part of item 9B. At your request, I did put in the packet, the job description of the investigator. And that's on page 17. And I do want to make it clear, I tried to make it as clear as possible on the hard copy that this is not an official document of the HR department. But it does reflect what was approved by the Personnel Board, because I took this to the Personnel Board to change the title from PRC investigator to Police Accountability Investigator. I don't think there was any substantive change, a thing that was changed substantively. It was really replacing any reference to the PRC, either to the staff or to the Police Accountability Board, staff being the Director of Police, Office of Director of Police Accountability. So this is it. Now, I do need to reiterate what I had said before, that it's my belief under the charter that the power, the authorization to hire, evaluate, and terminate all subordinate employees of the Office of Director of Police Accountability lies with the director. So I suppose you could have input about what you think are the desired qualities of the investigator, but I don't believe that there's a role for the board in seeing resumes, interviewing people, or any of that.
Well, we did discuss that in the subcommittee, and we have an interest the same, and I think the board does too, with the qualifications, et cetera, and the interests of the potential candidates. And we would like to work cooperatively with the director to have input on that process as well. It is different. I appreciate that. But it goes hand in hand with the selection of the director, essentially putting a great deal of power into the hands of that person. And that person, I think it would be wise to have it be a collaborative decision, although not ultimately decided by the group, but by the one person, the director, but hearing the voice of the board. I think is important. And I know that'll be a new person to discuss it with, but I think the description and the rough draft, I guess we'd call it, of the job, I think could be edited a bit to reflect that. What I just said, that it's a collaborative process.
Yes. Board member, do you have any recommended actions in terms of this particular portion of the item?
Well, I guess I'm a little bit at a loss because I don't know what will happen before it gets to the director. We don't even have a director yet. So who's going to sort through this all before the director is even selected in terms of the final description of the job and the soliciting of applications? It's not going to be a buyer's group process, but it's
No.
HR, I assume.
It's going, yes, it will go through the HR, normal, more typical hiring
Yeah,
process.
It's not the department head, but I think, again, it's
So any, if I may, any
Yes.
change to this job description would have to go back to the personnel board.
Yes.
So-
Board member Levine, do you think, partially in the interest of time, partially because I think we'll have a better idea, hopefully in a week or two here, that we could re-agendize this portion?
Yes, I think so.
yeah.
Is there
Waiting
any,
for Ms. Bello.
is there any reason why I couldn't discuss with her whether there's a mechanism by which we could participate in this through HR? Or is that,
Just with Ms. Bello?
yes,
Sure, if you want to do that on an informal basis.
okay.
She's
You're
the
gonna talk to her
former
about
HR
the-
director.
That might help
Okay.
figure
Okay.
that all out. Thank you.
Definitely. Board member Owens.
So I just want to raise this. It says clearly in the charter that the director hires the investigator. It does not say that the board has a part in that. I think that with the director, just hearing from the board, the qualities that we think are important, I think that's our role. I don't think we have any other role. I don't think it's appropriate for us to have another role. It's a hiring of a city employee. It's not, and that employee reports to the director. It's not the same as with the director, which the director reports to the city manager, not city manager, but to the mayor and the council. And that director works closely with us. The investigator works for the director. So I don't think it's appropriate that we, modify job descriptions, review resumes, or have any part in the civil service employment process. I think where we can help is we can give the director some guidance on what we believe is important for the position. And she can make the decision if, as she's reviewing, or whomever is going to review this, that they take those things into account. I think that's what's appropriate.
And thank you, Board member Owens. Yeah, I don't disagree, because I think functionally that is the end of our role and that, but I do think it underscores the importance of our role in the DPA search, in the DPA reviewing of applications, because this individual will have the power to hire basically the entire office of folks who will work under them on this, which is understandable, but places an immense amount of responsibility on that person. But no, thank you for your comment. Board member Ramsey.
I'm just really briefly, I'm aligned with board member Owens here. I think, I think at a certain point we should stay, what I would see is staying in our lane. So, but I'll leave it at that. I'm ready to vote if other people are. I'm going to vote no, but probably be outvoted.
Yeah, I don't think we have a motion on the floor.
I don't think we're
Yeah.
voting on anything.
No.
I don't think so.
I don't think this needs to be continued to the next board meeting. I think that we can close this out. So I'll make a motion that we don't continue this and that we close this out. That's my motion.
I second it.
Okay. Ms. Lee, if we can call the roll on that. And,
Sure.
What is
we'll move
close it
on.
out? What is, I'm not sure exactly what that.
Take no further action.
So that would be our
But-
final
but-
action.
Okay, but we could get a report back, right? Or you're saying we can't?
What kind of report? Or what do you mean by report back? A report on what?
No, I guess you're right. Okay.
Well, I had said to Director Lee, could I informally discuss this with Ms. Bello? I'm going to talk to her and see if there's a mechanism with which we could participate with HR in tweaking, editing, this job description.
And I'm gonna repeat again, I don't agree it's our role, and I'm making a motion that is, I don't agree it's our role. I think that we can make a motion to close this out and not re-agendize it.
I second it.
Okay. Board Member Harris, and then let's call that question.
Yeah, so I agree with Board Member Owens. I mean, tweaking the job description is more than a notion, and it is a process. So I think that as long as our board is involved with the director position, I think that, yeah, we should just bow out of this, because ultimately the director has to work with these people and they should have final say so, just like the charter says. So I
Well,
agree.
they will. The director will. This is
Yeah, but if we're talking about
proposing otherwise.
Yeah, but I agree with Board Member Owens. I think it's just a little too much for us to get involved in.
Thank you. Board Member Levich.
Well, I agree as well that it probably crosses over into HR too much, but I don't really like the idea of saying we can't ever discuss it again. That seems a little strange to me. We're not voting on anything tonight. So I don't know if we need to say it can never be agendized again.
I don't think that's, the motion would be to just not have this particular item on the investigator reappear on our agenda for the next meeting. That's my understanding of the motion.
Okay.
Obviously, if some incredible development took place, that would be different, but okay, Director Lee.
Yes, very quickly, and in the interest of full disclosure, when I did the recruitment for our temporary investigator, which is now filled, I also began the process for recruitment for a permanent investigator. And my intent was to start the process, but have things, I would not make a final hiring decision. In other words, the recruitment process takes months. And so I would want the permanent director to come in and have a slate of candidates for that person to choose. I do not think it would be appropriate for me to hire the permanent investigator. So I wanted to let you know that that is in motion, in process.
Thank you. Okay, let's go ahead and call that motion then
Okay.
to.
On the motion to close discussion, take no further action. Calavita,
Yes.
Chang,
Recuse.
Harris,
Yes.
Leftwich,
Yes.
Levine,
No.
Mizell,
Abstain.
Moore,
Yes.
Owens,
Yes.
and Ramsey.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries.
Thanks, folks. I know it took a little while, but we did do 3 items at once.
That's right. Thank you, Vice Chair. Actually, you did do lots with 3. I appreciate your acting. So we are now at, make sure are we at
9C.
9C,
9C?
yeah.
And we were going to combine FB with 9C. I'm sorry, 8F with 9C. Is that correct? 8F
Yes.
being the PAB budget. Okay.
Yep.
Yes, and before, Board Member Levine's draft is on page 21, but before that, because I did not furnish the background materials until this morning, and they are posted on the web for the public under supplemental materials. I wanted to really quickly walk people through the budget documents so that you understand what the ask is. So I'm going to share screen and explain a little bit about the budget process, which is that, well, first I'll explain about the budget process. The way that departments are asked to formulate their budget is we're given a baseline, which is pretty much based upon the current year's budget, and it could take into account any known changes in service delivery or whatever's going on in the outside world, maybe a drop in property tax revenue or whatever. But we're given a baseline budget. We have a lot of flexibility within the baseline budget categories. And then there's something called a general fund request. So that's anything outside of the baseline budget. So, and so that's why the documents that I presented to the budget proposal subcommittee and the ones that I'm bringing up now are sort of organized that way. So can you see what I've got up here?
Could you make it a little bigger?
Sure.
So we just want to be a little bit mindful of accessibility issues. So,
oh, wait, hang on.
Oh,
this
yeah.
is not, okay.
Okay. So is this the email you want to?
No, it's not the email. Are you seeing a, you should be seeing a PDF, ODPA staffing?
No, we're seeing your email.
Just
We're
an
seeing
email.
an email.
Okay, that's no good. All right, let me try again. Okay, let me see if I can multitask. So right now, we are, the Office of Director of Police Accountability is budgeted for 4 staff. And so basically, it's the PRC staff and the Director of Police Accountability was added. So so we have been budgeted for 4 positions, but we have only been operating with 3. And that's part of the reason why I'm so overwhelmed. But sorry, I'm still trying to find this item.
Kathy, do you want me to try to jump in while you do that?
Sure, that would be helpful.
So what we talked about in the subcommittee is the department is currently budgeted for a director of police accountability, the investigative position, an office support staff member, and then the 4th position was the old PRC officer position. And that position has been open for the last year, or since the PAB was formed. So that's an open position, but they're already budgeted for those 4. We at the subcommittee level discussed adding an additional position. And that position would be, what we would like to replace the open position with first is a policy analyst to support the board. So what we would like, what our vision is with the current budget, the director, the investigator, office specialist, and that open position, we'd like to see that as a policy analyst. Now, we also would like to have an additional investigator, because we are hopeful that as the word gets out, that, you know, we will have more investigations, more in-depth investigations. Not that we think that the department is gonna do anything different than they have. We're just thinking that with just the community being more aware of the process available to them, that it may be utilized more. And then we also discussed, there have been a suggestion that we add another admin staff, that we potentially should request a secondary admin staff to support the additional professional staff. And we at the subcommittee decided that we would rather see the addition of a professional staff member instead of an addition of a admin staff, because we feel like it's more important that we have a position that would be more like a data analyst, because the police department is generating a lot of data. There's a lot of support we could have with some data analysis. So we thought, instead of having another support staff, clerical person, we'd rather have a professional staff that can do data analysis. So we would like to see the current 4 that's budgeted for. We'd like to see 2 additional, one an investigator, one a data analyst, to go along with the current budget. So that's kind of what we discussed. And Director Lee, if you want to jump in now that you've got
Okay, everybody can see the screen now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Board Member Owens. Just, I think a slight correction to what you had said. My thinking, so here's that the 4th undetermined position, which is the former PRC officer. And my thinking is that this would be a policy person. So we have an investigator, and then we're going to have a policy. The number 4 would be a policy analyst. Now, I came to the budget proposal subcommittee proposing that we add a second investigator who could also be called on to do policy work as needed. And then for position number 6, proposing another clerical staff. And the budget proposal committee did suggest, no, how about a second analyst and not a provisional position. Provisional means that we would not establish a permanent position. It would be easier to cut them from the budget than if it were a permanent position. So that was the thinking on that. And then I'm going to call this up. So this is what's considered our funding request beyond the baseline that I was explaining. So this is money over that which had already been sort of at least tentatively allocated to us. So this shows, this is what I had presented to the budget proposal subcommittee before the edits here that are shown in red. So originally here's the investigator position. That's position number 5. The originally was proposing a second support staff, and then this now reflects how much it costs instead to hire an analyst into that 6th position. So these are wages and benefits. So these are not starting salaries, but it includes everything. That this is the total cost to the city. And then other beyond baseline requests include $50,000 that the budget subcommittee had proposed to provide outside assistance for policy review and development, and could include legal analysis. The city manager had actually proposed that we get some outside help in lead a strategic planning process for the board. And I thought that was a great idea because we're not currently integrated into the city's strategic plan. The city does have a strategic plan that helps both staff and the council prioritize. And so they have a series of goals, I think they're called. And with the thinking that whenever new initiatives are taken up, that they seek that the specific purpose or goal that initiative is to serve be identified. Then the city manager also said you may want to build in some money for a consultant to conduct a performance evaluation of your permanent director. Oh, so I should say that the strategic planning part is for this coming up fiscal year. So what's called fiscal 23 starts July 1st, 2022. And then your professional services would be, not professional services, your performance evaluation consultant would be for the following fiscal year after you've had that person in place for some time. And the rest of this is, phone, furniture, computer, office space for new staff that I had proposed. The budget proposal committee also wanted to send another board member to NACOL. I built into the budget sending 3 staff and 2 board members, and the board proposes another board member. So this is a grand total of additions of funding requests beyond the baseline is now over $500,000. So here, this is 23-24 baseline. So this is 4 people. It costs this much in 23 and 24. There's a slight increase, which I probably should. There's some small, I think, COLAs in here, and that's why the difference between that. And I actually hadn't done that for this, but I think that's, it's a pretty minor amount in relatively. And then all the figures that you saw on this sheet here are built in here. And these categories are the categories that the city uses when it builds out budgets. Board Member Owens asked me, what is it that actually gets submitted? And what gets submitted is actually in a program, a huge software program that the city uses. But this is extracted from there. These numbers are extracted from that program. And so these are the various categories. So these figures here are non-personnel, non-internal services. These numbers, internal services, are numbers that I have no ability to change. So this is basically 1947 Center Facilities Maintenance. That's our rent. There's an amount that goes to IT, and this counts replacement of hardware, software upgrades. It's all built in there, and mail and 1 parking permit. So here, this is a subtotal for internal services. So here's the bottom line. So we're basically, and so this reflects obviously the 530,000 that you saw in the prior sheet. So I wanted everybody to understand that that's what this looks like, and I'm going to turn it over to Board Member Levine to talk about the letter. Or answer any questions if you have any questions about the budget first, the budget numbers.
So I want to ask the board members if they're comfortable with the positions that we're proposing to add, because this is the first time that they're seeing, the data analyst. I think we brought forth before the additional investigator, but I just want to get feedback from the board on the positions that we're proposing and the thoughts of the subcommittee to, instead of asking for an additional support staff, to convert that to professional staff. So if board members can respond to that and let me know what they think, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to start. First we have Board Member Calavita and then Vice Chair Mizell.
So I am 100% in support of the data analyst idea. I think we've needed that for a while. We have reams of data coming from the department and we have no way of analyzing them. George Lippman has played a role in that in the past, just sort of unpaid labor. And I think that's really important to have that. But I didn't see that represented in the letter, nor in that list that the director just showed us.
On the list, it's number 6.
The data analyst?
Yes.
A second analyst who would focus more on data analysis.
Okay,
That's what
good.
that is.
Good.
And yeah, the letter probably needs some adjustment to the positions that are mentioned in it. I agree.
Yeah, so thank you for suggesting that.
Thank you. I would agree with Board Member Calavita that data analysis is important. The department has just flagged that it's going to have this transparency hub where where our data that we've asked for previously under the PRC will be posted as well. So there's gonna be a lot of information coming in. Vice Chair Mizell.
More or less echoing Board Member Calavita's comments, I fully support adding a data analyst and 2 data analysts if we can. I think this is the natural progression of where this board was supposed to be. I think all the work that's been done, or not all, much of the work that's been done in the city in the past several years has been around securing more data on the department, more understanding, more transparency. And the only way to meaningfully go through that is to have someone who can do that for us. If our independence is also meaningful, then we should have someone who's on staff for us to do it other than the city, where we don't have to wait on requests, where there's not occupied by many other things in the city, which is obviously an issue given how busy our staff is. And last, I'd say to Board Member Calavita's point, we've had either board members do the work to try to analyze, find things. We're fortunate to have community members who do the work to find things and analyze, but ultimately we're not paid members of any type of staff. We get a stipend of a max of $500 a month. And with the current charter, we can't even write off, right? Even if I spent several hours analyzing something, I can't get reimbursed for those hours in any way. That has to go to some type of staff. And right now we're left with maybe asking someone in the city to do the work for us, or just not having the information analyzed, which compromises our overall mission. So fully in support. I would add 2 data analysts. I think it's needed, and it's only going to be more needed in the coming years of the board.
Great, thank you, Vice Chair Mizell. Are there other comments about the positions? Board Member Levine.
You're muted.
Hey, you're muted.
Barbara Levine, you're still muted.
You're muted.
I'm very sorry. No, I was just saying, because Board Member Calavita pointed out I had not included the addition of the data analyst. Right up in the beginning, and maybe I can edit this, the budget includes this is like the second sentence, the budget includes the addition of a second investigator and a policy analyst. I could say policy, data analyst, policy and data analyst. I don't know, I just put policy, but I could make that more specific.
I thought there were 2 different positions, the policy analyst and the data analyst.
It is.
Well, okay, so
basically what this should refer to is a data analyst and a second investigator is what we're asking.
So, okay, I'll put a comma, data analyst and policy analyst.
No, data analyst and second investigator. The policy analyst is going to be funded from the funds that are already budgeted for.
Well, that's why so So how would you suggest editing the
the-
second
the-
sentence? Just changing policy to data?
Yes.
Change policy to data.
Okay, okay,
And then
good.
also at the bottom of your letter, you reiterate, for that reason, we are requesting the funding of one
okay.
additional, so you need to change that as well.
Add a data analyst.
Yeah, data analyst and a second investigator.
Okay,
Oh, and I want to thank you for taking the time to write the letters. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
you're welcome. We can edit it. Kathy, Director Lee will help me.
Mhm.
Great.
Could I make just one very brief suggestion along those lines? It strikes me that the last two paragraphs, the short one and the longer one,
Yeah,
could be a little less negative in terms of we can't do the job.
oh, okay.
You know, it makes it sound like we're doing a poor job.
Oh, okay, let me think of,
Make it more positive in terms
Yeah.
of this would really be a boost. Yeah.
yeah, okay.
Any other comments, questions?
How can you just give me some guidance in terms of how we can this be approved, Director Lee, with me doing these edits without having to come back to the board to get this out on time?
Yes, I think if the board is comfortable that you are, will and can, and of course we'll work together, you know,
Yeah,
revise the letter consistent with the suggestions. I don't see a problem, and I don't
Okay.
think anybody doubts our ability to do so, so.
okay,
Yeah. That sounds
thank
good.
you.
So are there further comments or questions, or are we ready for, do we need to do a motion then to?
Yes.
Yeah. Any other suggestions or comments or questions?
I move that we authorize Board Member Levine working with Director Lee to edit the letter and send it off.
Great, is there a second?
I second that.
Does Board Member Harris seconded it? Any questions about this?
I have one.
Sure. Board Member Levine.
Yeah, it's my understanding this is going to go out under your name for the whole board, right? Chair Chang.
Yes,
That's it.
most letters do come from the chair.
Yeah. Okay.
Director Lee sends to me then for
Right.
review.
He
as
gets
well.
to see the final.
Yeah.
and make any
Okay.
comments.
Any other questions or comments? Just let you, somebody's, I was hearing some radio sound there. Great. So do we need to do a roll call?
We could probably do this by general consent.
Okay. General consent then, not seeing or hearing.
We'll
Oh,
ask if there's any objection.
I'm sorry, any objections? I don't, neither seeing nor hearing any objections. So moved by general
Carried.
consent.
Okay, Chair, if I could add one more thing on this topic, which is I will be doing a presentation to the Budget Committee on Friday, April 29th at 9 a.m. And I will send you the Zoom link when it becomes available. So anybody it's a public meeting, anybody's free to watch. And I imagine there will be a public comment period. Originally I had told the Budget Subcommittee that it was going to be a hybrid meeting at City Hall and on Zoom. It has since been changed to be Zoom only. So
Okay,
just to let you know that.
thank you. Okay. So we're going to move on to the next agenda item. We have completed all the way through
I think we're on 10B, Chair.
10B, that's correct. Thank you. Review proposed revisions to the EWSP or Early Warning System Policy. General Order E13 Policy 1041, Consent to Search Form. We've allotted 15 minutes. Time check is 9:26.
Yeah, we won't need that long because this is in part an FYI. You can find this form, this policy on page 31 of your packet tonight. This is a policy that was part of the Fair and Impartial Policing Working Group recommendation that was passed by council a year ago in February, calling for an early intervention system or an early warning system within the police department. The interest in the working group had in this topic was to identify any issues with individuals or patterns across the department having to do with racial disparities in stops and searches. And so this general order was, there's also a lexical version of it, which is identical, but in a different format, was revised a little bit by the department in response to conversations with the working group and submitted to the implementation subcommittee a month ago or something, and the subcommittee has been working with it and has made some suggested changes to it. It's hard to read the little comment on the right on the first page, but it's that the purpose, we've added some language to the purpose, and then we have added some other sections. You can look at this at your own convenience. I just wanted to show you what the subcommittee has been doing, working hard on this. And we will be meeting with Captain Roleri in about a week to get his response to these changes so that we can collaborate and get something. The rubber hits the road, not on the policy, but on how, how it's operationalized and the actual program. But for now, we're proposing this as the policy. Well, the department is with these suggested changes.
Again, a quick question.
Yes.
So that's a really good point. You have policy, and then in particular where it implicates police practices quite directly.
Yeah.
In the PRC, we had a lot of conversations with staff such as Captain Roleri about how does a policy get turned into training.
Yes.
So do you have a little bit of quick feedback on that process with the rest of the board, how that happens?
Well, no. But we hope to get those answers when we speak with Captain Roleri.
Okay, and that
the subcommittee has not been very successful in meeting with. We've met with Captain Roleri a couple of times, and we've met with Sergeant Lee a few times. But I have to say that we could use more collaboration.
Okay. So
and we're going to be doing that with Captain Roleri next meeting. Okay. So that's absolutely an issue. How is this actually done?
Yeah. That'll be a really important conversation. We worked with Captain Roleri in the past, and we look forward to working with him again.
Yes.
Board member left. Oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's more questions on this?
No, there's a question from board member left, which I don't know if it's on that issue, but maybe let you finish, board member Calavita.
No, I'm finished on this particular one. I was going to move on to the consent search form.
That's what my question was about. So go ahead.
Okay.
Okay. So turning the page on page 35, is what we're proposing, what the subcommittee is proposing as a consent search form. One other item in the package of the Fair and Impartial Policing Working Group was to require a written consent for consent searches. The vast majority, I mean, I was unaware of this, but the vast majority of searches done in the city are consent searches, where you simply ask, may I search your vehicle? And there was a consent search form in the past, and the department, in response to the Fair and Impartial package that passed council requiring a written consent, put together a consent form, which the committee felt was really quite inadequate because it didn't talk about which car, which house, and so forth. And so we took a consent search form that has been used successfully in North Carolina, written up in some of the scholarly literature, that looks a little bit like this. We actually simplified it from the North Carolina one that we originally used as a model. This states right up front, I don't consent to a search or I do consent to a search. And then these are the items I consent to be searched. Check only those that you consent to, sign, and that's it. And so this will be, and then on the next page, turning the page over, you'll see that there's also a Spanish language version, but that Spanish language version has not been, that's not the final version of the Spanish language. The Spanish language one will be identical to this English one. Are there questions? So
Yeah, I had a question.
Yes.
So my only question about this is that when it comes, if I check the box person, if I'm giving the police authority to search my person, I'm not sure what that means. So I personally, there's a little more detail about some of the other categories. But I mean, I'm assuming that I'm allowing them to like pat outside my clothing. I don't know. I've never been searched.
Right.
But it makes me a little nervous because there's no limitations on that. So could they stick their hand up my shirt or, and I guess those of you who practice criminal law, or Mike, I don't know if you know, but I personally would like to see some clarification about that because I don't think people would necessarily know what they're consenting to without it.
Board Member Ramsey, what do you think could be specified there? Are you there? Anybody else have a suggestion, either from the?
I haven't looked at it, but I'm sure there's a policy that says when they search a person, what they do. And I'm sure there's limitations on putting their hand up somebody's shirt as an example. So I think Board Member Lethbridge brings up a good point, but I think that what it means is we as a subcommittee should probably just go and find their search policy and make sure we're comfortable with how they search a person. And I think that hopefully that will alleviate or answer the question for Board Member Lethbridge.
Okay, well, yeah, thank you for that. And this is, the subcommittee just wanted you to see what it is we're doing right now. And this is, of course, not final. We haven't had the conversation with the department. And when we do discuss it with the department, we'll answer that question about what kind of specificity might we need to put next to person, if any.
Right, well, they might not think you need it, but I just think as an individual, if I'm signing a consent form, it's not clear based on this, the scope of the search that I'm consenting to.
Right. Good point.
Great, thank you. It's a good question. And I'm sure Board Member Ramsey can provide some helpful feedback on that too. Vice Chair Mizell has had his hand up for a while, and then Board Member Levine.
Yes, thank you, Board Member Calavita and the Soul Subcommittee for bringing this forward. I understand this is still a draft, so I won't go too in detail. Just one concern on the consent form for residents. I would hope for maybe a slightly more detail, given that a person could obviously give consent to search a portion or a part of their house or a living room for something, without necessarily giving permission for the entire residence. Also, slightly more detail could avoid I don't see our officers doing this, but someone writing down an address for which they do not have full control or access over, and then searching an entire residence of which they did not actually have the right to, but then claiming that the consent form gave them the right by some person who lived in maybe one portion of a residence or rented one. So just maybe slightly more detail there to parse out, that it's not a blanket search of any residence of every single crevice whenever someone fills that out. But I appreciate the work so far.
Yeah, so there's a lot of scope questions that are being asked here, and with requests for specificity in the document. Board Member Levine has a question.
Yes. My question is back to the point that Board Member Calavita brought up, the operation. How are the police instructed to utilize this? There's no requirement in law that a consent form be obtained. Verbal consent is satisfactory. So this is a higher level, as Berkeley and we hope to, have than their minimums. Because if this is just something that's in the patrol car, but
no, it's mandated by council now.
Oh, okay.
That was part of the fair and impartial
I see.
package.
Okay.
That's mandated written consent. Yeah.
Okay. Good.
And by the way, I apologize. I just remembered that Board Member Levine is also a criminal attorney. So she, in addition to
Right. So do you have any ideas, Board Member Levine,
Well,
about
yes,
how you?
but I think it's probably not practical to have a conversation. The police can if they have reason to believe, based on the totality of the circumstances, that you have a weapon, they don't need your consent to search. So these are situations where they clearly don't have probable cause or reasonable suspicion, but they want to search, so they get you to agree to it, or ask you, which is part of what I'm interested in, the protocol of how this is presented. What is the training that goes with this to define why they give this to the suspect or to the person they're seeking consent from? So is that clearly delineated, Board Member Calavita?
You mean how it is they present the form to the individual?
Yes.
No.
Okay.
I assume that will be discussed in training.
Yes, I would think it should be. And
all that was, mandated was that they get written consent, and they had put together a consent form that had no place to say I do not consent. And it had no place to describe your vehicle or your anything. So this was what we put together. So
I think it's very good, but I do think that some of these categories, subcategories, could be clarified. Maybe just a few lines to answer some questions, that maybe just have a section for questions.
What do you mean?
I mean, if a person says, well, what do you mean, search my person? Just as Board Member Leftwich said, the person says, well, I don't care if you look in my jacket, but I don't want you touching my under my jacket or something like that.
Mhm.
There might be a catch-all section for limitations to any of these. I don't know. It's,
Mhm.
I think keeping it simple is a good idea. I don't know what that
Right.
North Carolina one said, but sometimes inviting questions or inviting, amendments or qualifications so
Yeah.
that you can sort of say, yes, but not here and not there. Another thing, just to answer board member, Vice Chair Mizell, there is a lot of law describing when a police officer can search a particular part of the house or can't. And clearly, if the person who they're seeking consent from and is filling this out doesn't have authority to search, to live in or to store their things in a certain place, it would be good to get them to identify the places only that they only reside or live in. So that would help if there's a simple way to portion. You could even say residence or portion of residence. It's hard to do this just on a conversation, so I don't want to take time, but
Yeah.
The point is, you're not going to authorize them to search your roommate's room.
yeah,
when-
just to clarify, what residence or portion of residence, something like that.
Mhm.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Good suggestions on scope issues.
We'll come back later with, yeah, I don't want to take any more time tonight because this was just an FYI.
Yeah.
Sure. And the board member Owens had her hand up previously. Do you still have a comment or question?
I'm just gonna make it real brief. There is a policy on search. So, and we didn't bring that forward. We just, like Board Member Callahan said, we just wanted to share with the board what we've been working on. Also, just be aware that when they when an officer has a discussion with an individual and says, would you consent to search? They are also required to turn on their body worn camera. So you can hear exactly how they ask them, exactly what the person says that they consent to search. So, I mean, when you start adding up, one of the things we talked about in the subcommittee is we don't want to overload the form because clearly a person that's being asked for, them to be searched or their property be searched as a potential, that, it's a stressful situation. So, adding more to this document is not going to help alleviate any of that stress. They're already going to be stressed out. So that's why we're trying to simplify the document. But I did want the board to be aware that it is recorded on their body worn camera. It's required in their policy. And there are rules in their policy that defines how they have to approach this.
Great, thank you. That's very helpful. Board member Levine and then board member Moore.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I my hands should be down now.
Yes, board member Moore.
I just wanted to add my thoughts and just the particulars about when it comes to search in a residence and the person who's getting searched, and it is a stressful situation. And, this is how the police get to, use the power of search in a, I'd say in a more aggressive manner, is because someone doesn't know their rights and is unable to understand the difference between, what they're allowed, what they're being asked, what is acceptable. And authorization for a resident search is one of those things that I think scope and scale needs to be discussed, needs to have clarity on the form, just so there isn't confusion by your average citizen.
Okay, thank you. So call on scoping questions, perhaps write directly on the form. Thank you. Any other comments or questions on consent to search on the form? Great. So I'm not seeing anything else. So I believe we would just move on to 10C. Thanks for your work on this, board members. We're working on those items under B. Review proposed changes in policy 3116, warrantless searches of individuals on supervised release search conditions and decide how to respond. 15 minutes with Director Lee, and a time check is 9:46. I think this is page 30. This is page 37. Let's see.
It's page 147 of your packet.
147 of the packet.
Yes.
Thank you.
So this is going to the city council. This item is going to the city council on April 26th. Or, I'm sorry, I think it's going next week.
What, on the 19th?
It's not going on the 19th. It's going on the 26th. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
When the ALPRs are also on?
Completely blanking out. No, this is going, let me start over again. This is going to the Public Safety Policy Committee on April 18th, Monday.
April 18th.
Ah, yeah.
I'm sorry, what was the page in the packet?
The page in the packet is 147.
I don't
No,
see a 147 in the.
You know what?
37.
Chair Chang was right. It's page 37.
Oh,
phew.
So.
And Director Lee, if it goes to the Public Safety Committee on April 18th, when does that mean it will go to council?
Probably the next, it wouldn't go on the 26th. It would be sometime in May.
Okay.
So, but I'd like to give the board a little bit of background. And actually, were you prepared to do that, Board Member Calavita?
I'm prepared to do just a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I was prepared to do. I mean, what I did on page 43 is to supply a timeline so that the board could see how much work the PRC had done on this. So, which was, it extended over quite a long period of time. It was done, I believe, in response to a referral from the council, and had the direct involvement of Chief Greenwood. So I believe there's sort of a process issue here, which is that the council member is proposing this, and there's really no reference to the history and the thought and the discussion and debate that went on in formulating this policy, and in full collaboration with the police department. And I remember that the subcommittee, I believe, heard from outside speakers, and somebody had, I believe one of the public speakers actually recalled that people from Oakland came in and spoke. So I think it's important that the council be made aware of this, of the background of where the policy as it is came from. And then I'm going to turn it over to Board Member Calavita, who can tell you a little bit more substantively about what's going on.
So I think before my time on the PRC, I think it was in 2017, there was a referral from council of some sort on this topic. But in 2019, it was initiated internally by us. I had become aware of some issues around inquiring about parole status. As you heard from one of the public speakers, Mr. Edine, I think it was, there were complaints coming from the community, African-American community, that as soon as they were stopped, they were asked if they were on probation or parole. So initially this began as a subcommittee to investigate possible policies around making that inquiry. And then subsequently searching. So that's how it began. And we did meet every subcommittee meeting. We met, Lieutenant Montgomery was there with us, and Fomby, who is no longer with the department. And we had outside experts come in. We had the Assistant Chief of Probation come and speak to us. We worked very hard on this, and I have done a lot of research on the subject. And let me just tell you a couple of things that I've learned. One of the things that we really should be aware of is that California is one of only 9 states in the country that allows police officers to do warrantless, suspicionless searches of people on parole and probation if their probation has a search clause attached to it. So it's an unusual situation that we allow police officers in California to search parolees and probationers only because of their status. And we looked at this also from the point of view of racial disparities, because people of color are vastly disproportionately subject to these searches, partly because, or largely probably because, they are disproportionately on probation or parole. In Alameda County, 71% of probationers are people of color. So as I said, we had the Assistant Chief of Probation come and speak to the PRC, and he gave us some numbers, and he talked about how they organize people, categorize people, their clients, into high risk or low risk. And they subject people in the high risk category to much more intense supervision, but people in the low risk category, the Assistant Chief said they believe that sometimes it can do more harm than good for the reentry of that individual if they're in a low risk category, to subject them to too much intervention. The Division of Parole actually divides parolees into 5 categories according to what their risk for reoffending is. And they have a special case category that includes sex offenders, domestic violence violators, and several other categories. And those special cases are subject to very intensive supervision, including searches. So the parole officers and the probation officers are doing these searches according to the risk that the individual has for reoffending. So, I mean, I could go on and tell you some of the things I've learned from the academic literature, but in general, what the academic literature says about probation and parole searches is that there was one study that did statistical analysis across the country and found that these searches do not reduce crime. They increase recidivism, in part because they increase technical violation violators who are sent back to jail or back to prison, and it increases costs. So you can see on page you see on page 37 of your packet tonight that the proposal coming from council members Taplin and Droste, the critical part, I mean, this is a very short, current policy is short, it's just a couple of paragraphs, and this is the central paragraph here. The way we had it written, or the way it is written in current policy, and Chief Greenwood, then Chief of Police, was central in this wording that's now being proposed to delete. The current policy would be that that a police officer may search a probationer or parolee if there are articulable facts that create a reasonable suspicion. So if there is a reasonable suspicion, which as you know, is a much lower standard than probable cause, that there has been a crime committed or about to be committed and so forth, then they may search. But absent reasonable suspicion, it would be not allowed in the city of Berkeley. So that section has been proposed to be deleted and replaced by something that basically would return the policy to the ability to be able to search without any reasonable suspicion. As you can see, it says articulable facts that support a need to enforce and or confirm compliance with probation or parole conditions, which is an open door. So I would propose that the PAB send a recommendation to council to reject this change, because it's not an evidence-based proposal. There's some anecdotes here. There's a discussion of a sex offender who lives in Berkeley. And there's several reasons why that's kind of a specious example. One of them being that that person is classified as a special case for a parole officer. They would be subject to intensive supervision by their parole officer. Another would be if there's any reasonable suspicion, they can be searched. So I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Board Member Calavita. That was a really helpful overview. I recall being on that committee with you, as a number of us were, and you did great work on working with us and bringing in folks to speak. And we really did a very deep dive and evidence-based review with experts coming in, including, from what I recall, perhaps faculty members as well as practitioners. We have a question from Board Member Leftwich, but I thought that Board Member Ramsey had his hand up previously.
I lowered it for a second. Thank you.
Okay, so if you want to speak again, just raise it again. Board Member Leftwich?
Yeah, I too, and Chief Greenwood agreeing with the language. I'm just wondering what triggered this proposal? Do we know?
I really have no idea. I really have no idea.
So there's no, I'm trying to find the rationale here for the change. Typically, when you change policy, yeah, go ahead.
To tell you the truth, I think what has happened is that there's been, some increase in shootings in the city of Berkeley and some increase in certain kinds of crime, although overall crime has not gone up. I mean, that's what you see in the discussion of this policy.
Right.
And so the rationale is that this will reduce crime and have no cost attached. And from my research, I can tell you just the Pew Charitable Trust has a public safety project, and they did a broad overview of parole and probation interventions. And they found that, let me quote from that, a supervision system meant to encourage rehabilitation outside of prison often stands in the way of its own goal. I guess I didn't emphasize this in what I was saying, but one reason that I mean, aside from the racial inequality aspect of it and the fact that it doesn't seem to reduce crime, it seems to increase recidivism and jail costs, is that it sends the message to people who are trying to reintegrate into society that they are always still under suspicion. And I have actually spoken to people in this situation, and they talk about the indignities of being searched for no reason. And there is, in fact, no evidence that it reduces crime, and lots of evidence that it can do more harm than good, including spoken by the assistant chief probation officer in Alameda County. So this is something, I guess, when I heard this being discussed, I thought, wow, why?
Can I make one comment?
Sure, Board Member Ramsey.
I'm really looking at the language that's changing, which is trying to change the articulable suspicion or reasonable suspicion language that Chief Greenwood recommended to a statement that it says on, page 37 of the packet. It adds the language should be based upon articulable facts that support a need to enforce and or confirm compliance with probation and parole conditions. I don't understand how that's a workable standard for a police officer to apply. I mean, I'd be interested in hearing from Lieutenant Turner. My understanding is it's a rare circumstance that on patrol officers are familiar with what the actual probation and parole conditions are beyond don't commit a crime. So I'm not sure. It says should be based upon articulable facts that support a need to enforce or and confirm compliance with probation and parole conditions. I guess I would ask Lieutenant Turner, for patrol officers, I mean, is that a workable standard? Do patrol officers actually know the conditions of the specific parole and probation orders of individual people on the street? And is that available to you in your database in any way?
If they've had, regular contact with that person or someone in their beat that they're familiar with, and yes, we would know what their search conditions are, certainly.
But only in that circumstance where you'd actually reviewed that specific person's order. But if you just caught someone, saw someone randomly on the street that you understood or later learned from your CLETS check was on probation, would that provide you any information about what the conditions of probation or parole were?
If we did a records checks on that person when we first meet them for the first time, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I mean, my understanding from when we talked about probation and parole searches before asking the question was that there still was an ability for patrol officers to check whether someone was on probation or parole. So I understand you could check whether someone was on probation or parole, but this is a whole nother level of detail, and that's trying to understand what the specific conditions of release are, or the conditions of probation or supervised release or parole. Would you have the ability to check that on the street?
We would if we had a reason to detain that person.
Yeah, how would you go about checking what the conditions were?
That would come back in the records check.
Okay, and you said that you would do that if you had the ability to detain them?
Yes.
And you would only have the ability to detain them if you had reasonable suspicion?
Yes.
So I don't understand how this is a workable, like if you have to have reasonable suspicion already to detain someone to actually learn what the conditions are, then you would have already met the requirements for reasonable suspicion that was previously in the clause before that they're deleting. So I just don't understand how this is a workable standard.
They're vague too.
Like, it just seems like what you're telling me, Lieutenant Turner, is before you can even check the conditions, you have to have reasonable suspicion that a crime was committed. So in an odd way, this seems to increase the standard, at least in terms of the practical application of the rule.
My understanding, and I'm not an expert in this area. I wasn't, involved in the policy decisions when PRC assisted in creating this policy, but
Yeah, interestingly enough, this language came from Chief Greenwood. I remember quite specifically.
Yes, it did.
So I think some of the concern is that if, for instance, I know Commissioner Calvi, you mentioned that one particular sex offender case, but we have 150 sex offenders in the city of Berkeley, we can't check to make sure that they're following the guidelines of their probation or parole, for instance, or if we have arson parolees or probationers, we can't make sure that they're following the conditions of their probation or parole without a reason, without them doing something to bring themselves to our attention.
See,
with this policy.
I mean, this is a policy that's going to go across the board, across not just those particular, circumstances you talk about. And what I just don't understand is how you're going to be in a position to know what the conditions, to understand what she writes. The council members write, need to enforce or confirm compliance with probation or parole conditions. So I'm just not like, this just to me doesn't make sense. Like, they're not gonna be in a position to know what probation and parole conditions are by and large in most situations. So
the average number of conditions on a parolee and a probationer are 17.
Yeah, look, I look at federal, supervised release search conditions all the time, and I know Board Member Levine did too. There's a long list of standard of conditions, and then special conditions, and some are, added and deleted, et cetera. But I'm just, to me, though, like the way this is written is this is a lot less workable standard than what there was before in most circumstances. I understand if the officers already are familiar with someone's probation or parole conditions because of previous interactions, then it may not be an issue. But that seems like that's going to be a rare occurrence, that officers are actually have familiarity with someone's search and probation and parole conditions. I think most of the time they won't have that. And then they're going to have to already have reasonable suspicion. Then on top of that, they're going to have to tie it to a very specific condition that they think that there's a need to enforce or comply with. That doesn't seem workable. It's just like on the street. It just does not. I'm trying to understand it, but then also I would love to see, have someone come in and show me what the CLETS looks like, where it shows the specific search conditions or not even search conditions, conditions of probation and parole in a database. I mean, that's an extraordinary amount of information. I'd love to see the way that that's actually presented to an on the street officer who pulls up someone's search parole conditions and what it says about them.
Can I just respond to that really quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
As an officer, you have to imagine that every day you're working your beat and you're very familiar with people in your area. So you do, when I was an officer, you start to have more and more contact with people. You get to know people in your area, in your community, and you are very familiar with, of course you're not going to know everybody, but you're going to be very familiar with who lives in your area and the folks that you've had interactions with as you spend more time on the street. And then real quick, it's not just CLETS. We have access to probation and parole status through other systems such as CRIMS. That's an Alameda County system, and as well as I can't remember the name of it right now, but the Contra Costa County probation system as well.
Yeah, and I'm not, I understand that you have the ability to find out someone's status, whether they're on probation or parole. But what I'm trying to find out is a whole another thing, which is finding out what their specific conditions are that are put forward in a judgment and commitment order. And that's where I'm not understanding, or would love to understand a officer's ability to see the conditions that are imposed by a judge in a judgment and commitment order at sentencing.
Those are accessible in CRIMS very easily, and it's easy to digest for the officer.
Okay, I'd love to see if we could have if I could see some printouts of that or something so we could just understand that. Because ultimately this seems like just to me, it seems like a less workable standard. But anyway, I've talked enough, so I'll let other people talk.
Well, thank you. That was helpful. Vice Chair Mizell and then Board Member Harris.
Yes, I'll try to keep it brief. I mean, I obviously respect maybe the intention of council members in public safety, but I feel like this was introduced as a solution to a problem that doesn't exist in the city. It came up, I forget what meeting it was, where an anecdote was offered by one officer, BPD, about some difficulty they had in searching a particular sex offender. I would love if that officer would come to these meetings and give us the full details of that. But after that, council members said they wanted to take action and change it and stop crime in the city. That is how this got to us, plus the increase of shootings and other things that would not at all be solved by this change. I would strongly recommend to our colleagues that we accept what Board Member Calavida's recommendation of rejecting this. I don't think we should be in the business of endorsing policies that have no evidence basis. I don't think we should be rolling back policies we spent a year plus getting in place, hearing from experts, hearing from community members, just because of one anecdotal account of the department that has, to my knowledge, never even been presented to the board and was not a topic of conversation when the policy was enacted during those discussions. So to me, it makes little sense to do much else. And I agree with Board Member Ramsey. In trying to fix a problem that doesn't exist, they seem to narrow their ability to actually enforce this policy in many cases. And I'll stress again that I haven't said it tonight, but I've said other meetings that most states, this isn't even the question. States that are supposedly way more conservative, cities that are supposedly way more conservative than Berkeley, don't have our liberal values, do not allow these type of searches in their city. Why now, after the policy just changed, and one anecdotal account, should the city be changing course after an evidence-based policy was put in place with the collaboration department, with the same language as chief police, with some of the assurances of the actual assistant director of parole in this county, because someone said something about one incident and can't provide actual details, and the actual details I would pretty sure would reveal there would be other ways to handle the situation. If this is a sex offender case, there's more registries on sex offenders in this state than pretty much any other type of criminal act. If the concern was, well, we can't search them, well, they can call up Alameda County and come down and do the search for them if it was such a serious public safety issue. And if somehow they have enough facts to determine that they believe a search is warranted, but not enough to do so to reach reasonable suspicion, which is a low standard to reach, that's not policing. That's just government invasion into daily lives. That's a Fourth Amendment violation if you don't have a fourth waiver, which virtually every parole standard has a fourth waiver, regardless of what you did, and 20 other conditions with it that we know from all sources of evidence does not help a person actually re-enter society. I'll stop there for the sake of time. What's in front of us should clearly be rejected. In fact, it may make the police jobs harder in this language. And I fully agree with what Board Member Calavita has said.
Great. Thank you very much. Board Member Harris and then Board Member Levine, and time check 10:15 and then Board Member Calavita.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm also in agreement with Calavita and Ramsey. And I would say that there definitely needs to be a little more look at the search clause stuff, the search conditions. I mean, the parole conditions. And it's my understanding that with CLETS, you only get a response that says the person is on parole, whether or not they are on parole. And then secondly, what the search clauses are. but I don't believe that the actual conditions, as Member Ramsey said, are listed in those CLEX returns. So I think that we'd have to do a little more research on that as well.
Great, thank you very much. Board Member Levine, and then back to Board Member Calavita.
Yes, I agree with everybody. I really strongly urge that we communicate clearly this history that Director Lee put together, and with the literature succinctly supporting this original compromise that was authored by Chief Greenwood. So that the council, and I don't know because I haven't been there and I haven't seen or heard the history, so that they know that this is something that didn't come from just anywhere. It came with this history and has this data and analytic support behind it after great work by the chief with the PRC.
Great. Thank you. Board Member Calavita.
Yes, I really want to thank Board Member Ramsey for pointing out the problems of this language here. There are so many different conditions and they're changing all the time. I would say, though, that the purpose, the motive for these council members' proposal is basically to reject the current policy that we worked so hard to get through. And so I would prefer not to focus on your language isn't so good because I worry that they will focus on more clear language. That's not the point. The point is we need to revert to the current policy, which is based in evidence-based best practices, and which is frankly not, anyway, I'll stop there. But I would also like, if I could tonight, get authorization from the board to go to the meeting where council discusses this, so I can present the PAB perspective.
Great, thank you very much. And
People are in agreement with that perspective.
yeah, someone can, I don't know, I guess someone needs to raise a motion, is my understanding. So you're right. The conversation here, what I'm hearing is that this is something that was fully vetted for quite many hours. Those of us who are on the subcommittee, we know this, and we were fully engaged in process with the relevant stakeholders, which included Chief Greenwood, the chief of the police department, came to our meetings, provided line edits, and that language is right in here. It came through a very much of a thorough, process-oriented engagement with the relevant stakeholders over many months. And it was also based upon evidence. It wasn't just based upon a matter of opinion. So that's really important to let these folks know to ensure that they have an understanding of that history. Director Lee, and then Board Member Ramsey.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to make sure you understood where this is in the process. So it was originally put into the agenda process. And so it was moved from the Agenda and Rules Committee, and it was referred from Agenda and Rules Committee to the Public Safety Policy Committee. And that's the meeting that's happening on April 18th. So, which is Monday. So my suggestion would be that Board Member Calavita be authorized to speak on behalf of the board at that meeting. I don't remember if the Public Safety Policy Committee can actually remove the item or refer it elsewhere. I don't remember, but or if they have to send it on to council, but with whatever their recommendation is. Sometimes they send it with a positive recommendation or a qualified positive recommendation or a negative recommendation, I think. But as I'm talking, I don't think they can remove it from the process altogether. But the whole purpose of referring it to a policy committee is to have, like one of our subcommittees, take a closer look at it before it goes to council.
I see.
Director Lee, I would prefer my role to be at council. I don't see any hope for this at the Public Safety Committee, to be frank. And so, I mean, I suppose I could go there, although the timing is not convenient to me at all.
No,
It is going to be moved out of the Public Safety Committee.
okay.
I would bet my bottom dollar.
Okay. So that's an important strategy. But let's consider that. Board Member Ramsey, and then let's do the motion after that.
Yeah, I just wanted to note, I mean, we talked about this, but I'm looking sort of back at some things, but I just very specifically remember Chief Greenwood actually proposing the reasonable suspicion standard for deciding whether searches could be done under a probation or parole search clause. So
that's my recollection.
That's something that's like, seems to me, very much, missed here, but I sure hope that that's made clear. And I don't know, I mean, is it the department that is now saying that standard is, not workable or what? I mean, like Vice Chair Mizell said, I'm not sure whether this is a solution in search of a problem or, or even who's raised this within the department. But like I said, this very standard was actually proposed and suggested by the chief of police. Now, other folks agreed with it for various reasons, but
that's right.
That board member Calvita, but I really don't want that to be lost. This was not like some PRC generated policy that, had no involvement of the police department or that they contested. And then we went to the council and asked them to impose it on the police department. Quite the opposite. It was, we were discussing the issue and Chief Greenwood proposed this as a solution and we agreed with him.
Right.
That's right, Board Member Ramsey. We actually passed it, I believe, unanimously at the PRC with a stipulation that we would wait 6 months or something to get to elicit verbiage from the Chief Greenwood at the time. And so he did come back and he proposed this language. And frankly, it kind of surprised some of us, but anyway, that was their proposal and it was agreed to by the department. And so since there is agreement, I don't think it ever had to go to council to get voted on because there was no contestation.
Yeah, thank you for that history reminder. That's important. Board Member Leftwich and then Vice Chair Mizell.
So just to cut to the chase here, are we proposing a letter then? I mean, because it sounds to me like we should do a letter setting forth the history and our objections formally.
That would be my mind also, but I see Director Lee shaking her head.
Oh, I was shaking my head about something else, but
no, we should make a response to this. And I would also like to ask to sit as a panelist that night at council so that I could just do a little summary of why this is so important.
Yeah. I think that'd be a great idea. And we want to move to that quickly, but Vice Chair Mizell, you have a hand up?
Yes, I'll be brief. Board Member Ramsey reminded me of a point I should mention is, this, again, the only place I've seen this issue brought up publicly was at the council meeting reviewing the fair and impartial policing progress, where I forget which officer in the department, I believe they may have been asked a question or prompted by the council members, but gave this one anecdotal account. And then this policy is now in front of us, despite the fact that this whole policy was developed in collaboration with the department. And I would have far preferred that if there was some big loophole we all missed, that the conversation had started here instead of at council, where now we have to do, give her another recommendation. Obviously, council members have their role, they can do as they please. But to me, this would have been far better solved at our level if there was an issue, but that no issue has been brought to us from the department. But there are officers who I don't think was in the command staff or a lieutenant or a captain who say there's a problem, and now there's a whole problem for the city we have to solve.
Yeah.
So, obviously Chief Lewis is not here, so I'm not going to harp on it. But to me, that's a communication that could have been brought to us if there was some real concern. As we had conversations during the process, that did not take place. And I mean, it's concerning to me that if any officer can go to City Council meeting, you forget the process and just say, well, there's some issue with this. We would be changing every single policy or having to respond to every policy perhaps every single week. And that's just not an appropriate relationship to have, and not one that's going to foster any positivity between us in the long run. So I just want to point it out there. And whenever Chief Lewis is here, I'm going to bring that point up to her directly.
Thank you. It does raise questions about the role of the PAB and the relationship with the city council and creating pathways for open channels of communication when there are questions. We've had questions about this in the past as well. Director Lee?
I would still like to appear at the Public Safety Policy Committee, and maybe I would focus on the process and point out, I would not so much focus on the substance, but focus on the fact that this went through a very lengthy collaborative with the police department process, and that it really should have been returned to us, that the board does not really, it has not been made clear to the board or the public, I don't think, why there is a need for this change. So I think at least that much should be said at the committee level, rather than waiting to say anything at the full council. And I could also mention that, the board is prepared to, make a more detailed case about the flaws of the proposal at that council.
I think that would be great.
That'd be great. Yeah, so Director Lee, you would go on the 18th, and then at the city council meeting, Board Member Calavita would attend and then present.
And we would do a letter first.
And a letter. Okay.
Sorry, can I just?
Sure.
1 second, I was looking at some language. Sorry, just on a couple of things, if I could just share my screen real quickly.
Okay.
These are the packets from the PRC, just so that people are aware. And this was an email from Chief Greenwood in September 8th, 2020, and then probation and parole search. And I think this was where he submitted the first language with respect to searches not being conducted arbitrary, capricious, harassing standard. And I know that this was the first set his first proposal. And then there was some discussions then where he added the specific, the articulable suspicion. And that came, so this was on the packet for September 23rd, 2020. And then later in 2021, and sorry about doing this so hodgepodge. But then the 2021 agenda minutes, which of course I'm not seeing right here, in January, we then later came to an agreement on the language. So it was, I think it was January 27, 2021. Unfortunately, these are all archived and I'm not showing you that right now. But in any event, those are the two times, and that has additional information as well as to, here we are, as to our January 27th, I'm sorry. Here is the packet. And then there was the agreement on the language here. The final policy language agreed between the PRC and BPD. Surge is finalized on January 23rd, 2020. And that's where the language was added regarding warrantless searches on individuals and supervised release, and the articulable facts that create reasonable suspicion. So, I mean, again, this was a collective.
That was finalized at the PRC level and in 2020 and then incorporated.
Correct. And so it was in 2023, but it shows the language that was being sent by Chief Greenwood and that he discussed, and then he proposed the articulable facts, and that was then had been finalized back on the 23rd. So, I mean, this was very much something that had the full participation of the department and was actually based on their recommendation. So just people can see the history. This is right off the archives of the PRC's meeting minutes and packets.
Thank you. That's helpful. And all those who were on the committee recall Chief Greenwood was very involved with actual line item edits and participating in meetings, etc. So there's a lot of process there occurred. And as Director Lee is flagging, the concern here is that there's a situation that could pull us out of that process that is not based upon any change in the facts on the ground or on evidence that indicate that the policy that was produced was flawed in some manner or is impractical in some manner. So do we want to go to, do we need to do a motion now or for the plan with a letter and then the 18th and then the city council meeting? Can someone make
I make that motion. I make the motion that we write a letter recommending against this revision of the policy and reverting back to the original policy, citing all of the timeline and the collaboration with the department, and that Director Lee attend the Public Safety Committee and discuss the work that went into it at the Public Safety Committee, and that I would attend, hopefully with the agreement of council, that I could attend as a panelist and make a brief presentation.
I second that.
Okay, Board Member Leftwich is seconded. Are there any objections? Do we need to do a roll call, you think?
Yes, and if I could just get clarification before we do that, which is, I don't think there's time to have the letter for the committee level, but I think you're intending the letter go to the council.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Okay, on that motion, Calavita?
Yes.
Chang?
Yes.
Harris?
Yes.
Leftwich?
Yes.
Levine?
Yes.
Mizell?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Owens?
Yes.
And Ramsey?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries.
Great. Next item.
Okay, Chair, it's 10:35.
Yes. So shall we postpone these last several items to the next meeting? D, E, and F.
Do you think we could spend 5 minutes and authorize D?
Yeah,
think
I would
that's
like that too.
really important, and I don't think it'll take very long.
Director Lee, what do you think?
Okay, if you don't want to talk about it too much, I was just going to, all I was going to say was it's very tricky because
Yeah.
we want to counter whatever's being put there that puts you in a false light, a negative and false. At the same time, we shouldn't reveal anything that has been told to us by the city attorney in closed session. So
Okay.
if you're comfortable simply authorizing the chair and I to work on something, which I would run by the city attorney's office, that's
Sure.
fine. But if you need any more details on it, then we will have to have a conversation. So I leave it up to you as to your comfort level.
Yeah. What do you guys think? You know, there's a lot of information that's been out in the press. So there is some public facing information already, irregardless of the appropriateness of how it got there. Some of it's out there published in Berkeley side. And we as a board, I know that we disagree with the conclusions of that argumentation, that there is some kind of unprofessionalism or even violation that's occurred. The city attorney has backed us up on these issues too, with regard to the Brown Act, for example. But in particular, this is a new board, and this is a response that I think is very tactical, that we also have to respond to and understand it as a tactical response to a concern about the new board's authority. Everybody has to work with each other and come to a realization that this was passed by 88% of the voters of Berkeley through charter, and this is law. And we are here to work with all of the relevant stakeholders in a fair and transparent manner in the service of the public to provide the services of a modern police accountability board as approved as a mandate in November of 2020. So it's unfortunate that we have to get into this situation with responding to what I would think of as politicization of tactics. Some of it is, of course, has some merit of, some concern in terms of negotiating stakeholder guardrails and rights. It's not unexpected, but a lot of it is outside of that realm. I think it's been politicized in a way that's unnecessary. So it's unfortunate that we've been put in the position to have to respond to it in this manner, but we are in that position because there's now, as I said, public information going out, being presented in a particular way that if a person were to read this and did not come to our meetings, they might perceive there to be a board that's run amok, which is not at all the case. As I keep mentioning, folks, this is a highly professionalized board. Folks on the board, aside from being more than half or at least half attorneys, which is not a requirement for being on the board, but there's a professional attitude towards evidence-based review. We take a lot of time, essentially volunteer time, to go through and review policy and facts, and to be very careful on balance to work with the relevant stakeholders. So in that sense, it's a question about the not just the public's perception of us, of this board. I don't want to say us, I don't want to personalize it, but it's also an issue of our ability to get work done in the future, because it could have broad consequences with city council if there is a unchecked misperception that we are running amok and are unprofessional. So I think we do need to proceed with this, and it's an unfortunate situation, but we can do so in a way that's professionally in a professional tone, respectful tone, of course, that's responsive to the allegations, which would be our right to do so. Does anyone want to, is this something we need to raise a motion for them? It's at 10:41. Board Member Ramsey had his hand up, and then Board Member Leftwich.
I'm sorry, I just forgot to lower it.
Sure, Board Member Leftwich.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we say something publicly because the continued silence has allowed the BPA to unilaterally drive the narrative here, and that's all that the public has seen. I think it would be important for there to be a quote from the city attorney. So it would be like a, I don't know if we're envisioning a press release, but usually you'd have a quote, the city attorney says something. So it doesn't look like it's just us saying, well, the city attorney says everything's cool. And I know, Director Lee, you were going to say the city attorney would okay it, but I think it's also important to have a quote so that anybody reading it understands that this is what the city attorney has said. I also think it would be important to say that the BPA has been invited to participate in our meetings, both in our general meetings and the regulations subcommittee meetings, but they've declined to participate, and that we are hopeful that they'll be willing to engage with us in the future. So I think that's another important piece that the public needs to hear. And again, it can be quite, professional and matter of fact, but that information should be given to the public.
Great. Thank you. So, any other questions and comments about this? Is there a motion to authorize myself and Director Lee to prepare and issue a public statement in the line along the tone and line that lines that we just discussed, specific to the unfair practice charge?
So moved.
Seconded?
Second that.
I'm sorry, who was that?
Oh, I'm sorry, that was Board Member Leftwich was second, and then
Okay.
Board Member Calavito was first.
Yeah.
Should we do a roll call?
Yeah, I think I should do roll call.
Okay.
On that motion, Calavita,
Yes.
Chang,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Leftwich,
Yes.
Levine,
Yes.
Mizell,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Owens,
Yes.
Ramsey.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so we're going to postpone the rest of it. Everyone's put in a lot of work tonight. It's 10:43. Let's go to public comment. So there's a number of folks. Cordell Hindler. Please proceed.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
So good evening, Chair Chang, board members. My name is Cordell Hindler, and I'm a concerned citizen of Richmond. So I've been listening to the board meeting this evening, and I was disappointed for a couple of reasons. One is because that I didn't get a chance to speak on the items on the agenda for this evening. I wanted to speak on 10A because as someone who's an advocate for the city of Richmond, I feel that my voice is not being heard because I've been hearing the discussions this evening, and I feel that I've been ignored. It's supposed to be a meeting, open public meeting, and from what I'm seeing, it's like I just feel that my voice is not being heard, and for another reason, because I have nieces and nephews, and I'm trying to teach them how to stand up for themselves whenever they're in a public setting. And I feel that, to me, I mean, I love coming to these meetings, but I just feel that my voice is not being heard, because I wanted to speak on the agenda items earlier, and I have been raising my hand for the last 2 hours, and I feel that this is like, it's very concerning to me, because if you want public participation, you have to make sure that before you take any votes on the items, you have to hear from the public. So I'm just saying that, like in the future, that before you take any actions on whichever item it is, you have to hear from the public first, because if you recall when the Burke, Sorensen, and Williams firm came last time, there was a section in the Brown Act saying that the public has a right to participate in these meetings. So I'm just saying that for future reference, I know it's volunteer work, but I feel that my opinion should matter. So I'll just leave it at that, and I'll yield my time to the next person.
Good. Thank you. Kit Saganor. Ms. Saganor, are you on mute?
No, I need to allow her to talk.
Okay.
Okay, there we go. Sorry.
Now I could unmute myself. Thank you so much. Actually, just in reference to the speaker just before me, I have noticed that it can be a little difficult. The public comment period is only at the very beginning of the meeting for all the agenda items, and this group does not take public comment on individual agenda items as they come up. And you might want to consider whether there are cases where there are particular matters that you would take the public comment when the item comes up rather than at the beginning of the meeting. But what I really raised my hand was to thank you for your really, logical, rational, thought out response to the various issues that you have discussed this evening. It's very sort of reassuring to me that your group, all of you, contribute such thoughtful, really useful applied thinking to the issues rather than things based on emotional appeals or anecdotal and so forth. And I really, really appreciate that. Thank you so much for that work that you do. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Clark.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I have heard some things this evening that reach to how much weight to put on the charter amendment itself. I, like 88% of the voters in this city, voted for the charter amendment, but we did not dictate the result on the deck of the USS Missouri, and we didn't simply have words mean whatever we think they mean. This comes up for the very lengthy discussion that you had about the director search. It's worth recalling that the hiring decision for that office starts with the city manager recommending candidates to the city council, who then appoints the director. There is no role in the charter for this board to weigh in on that director, interestingly enough. I was really surprised to see that. You do have the authority to recommend removal, but you have no influence on the hiring, at least according to the letter of the law. The hiring decisions, in fact, all go through the Human Resources Department of the city. So it seems, I'm looking now at section 14 or paragraph 14 of the charter amendment. Those languages matter. And I think that in the future, when you're asserting your role, it would be useful to check in with the actual language of the charter and tie your claimed authority to the language in the document. That's a very useful thing. I think they teach in law school, I'm told. Similarly, the director of police accountability may hire a chief investigator, and the director of police accountability shall have the authority to hire and dismiss consultants and additional investigators. So I think those things are useful to recall when you're trying to navigate this new body. You're still in your learning phase, I think. This actually comes up when, this complaint, the unfair practice charge by the PPA, what I think they are telling you is that this office is embedded in a network of laws, including the Myers-Milius-Brown Act and the Brown Act. And what they're telling you is that it wasn't a universal dictate, even if it was 88% of the population of the voters who said that this board should come to exist. It's in a bigger system. And I guess I would ask you to think about that. I, for one, do not think you've run amok in any way, shape, or form, but I do think you should pay attention to the system. Thank you.
Thank you. Emily R.
Hi, I'm just back after about a month away, so it's continues to be interesting to hear all of these discussions develop. I first wanted to agree, just from a process standpoint, with Cordell, just as far as I know the way the structure is here, there's comment officially at the public comment at the beginning and at the end. But there was a process, and I've raised this before, when we were all in person, the rules, I believe, allowed, I don't know if it was chair's prerogative or the written policies and procedures, they allowed the chair to take public comment on the individual action items if there was kind of interest and time to do so. But given that we're in this electronic format and there's no real way for the public to, maybe 6 of us want to comment on a particular item, we can't really flag the chair unless we all, know you and have your cell or something. There's just no process in place for that kind of exchange. So I miss that. And the longer we stay in this fully electronic format, I don't know, it would be nice to come up with the better solution to allow some flexibility to the items of the most public interest, because I also agree the board really does need its time to have its own discussions around these complex and nuanced topics. So I don't want to cut into that too much, but it would just be nice for there to be more flexibility on particular items. And I wasn't going to comment on this, but I just will reiterate regarding the BPA allegations. The initial story I did, I reached out to the city attorney's office probably half a dozen times, and there was and multiple routes, there was never any response. And I only learned of the city attorney's comments to the board by talking to some of the board members around the time of publication or shortly afterward, and I updated the story. But I just think it's unfortunate that if the city attorney is making comments and making certain positions clear to you guys, I wish they also had made those clear to us, because we certainly want to report everything that we can across to make these, provide as many perspectives as we can, given the nature of these issues. But anyway, I do appreciate the time the chair and board members and director that I did get to speak with people, but there's limited ability we can't reflect what the city attorney said if they don't say it to us. And I wish that they had, because we certainly asked. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? I don't see anyone in the participants list. Okay, Director Lee shaking her head. All righty, so I'm going to, number one, stop the share. And secondly, we are in the last item. Would someone make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All right, have a good evening. It's almost 11 o'clock.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks,
All right, good
everybody.
night. Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
I vote is yes on that.
Good, thank you.